So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Hazbin Hotel. So let's start the series. The first thing Naruto remembered was the taste of ash. Not the clean, woody ash of a campfire, but the greasy, clinging residue of something that should never have burned. It coated his tongue, his throat, a phantom suffocation. The second thing was the silence. Not true silence, a low, insectal hum vibrated in the marrow of his bones, and somewhere, water dripped with the consistency of a slowing heart. But it was a silence of the soul. The Kyuubi's presence, a constant, grumbling hearth in the core of his being for so long, was gone. Utterly. It wasn't sleeping. It was absent. He opened his eyes to a crimson ceiling, stained and peeling. He was on a floor that felt like petrified leather. Every muscle screamed in protest as he pushed himself up. He was in his usual gear, the orange loud even in the dim light, but the fabric was torn at the shoulder, stained with something dark that wasn't quite blood. It smelled of ozone and regret. Where? Memories came in shattered pieces. A mission. A seal, ancient, spiraling, wrong. Not Fuinjutsu as he understood it. It was hungry. It didn't lock away power, it invited something in. A flash of light, a tearing sensation not in his body, but in the fabric of everything around him. And a voice, laughter woven from static and malice, whispering a single word as the world dissolved, mine. He wasn't in the Pure Lands. This place had a weight, a pressing, sentient malevolence that the Pure Lands never possessed. He stood, legs shaky, and moved to the single window. It was grime-caked, but he rubbed a patch clear. Hell stretched before him. A city of impossible, jagged architecture under a permanent, bruise-purple twilight. No sun. No moon. Just a dull, throbbing glow from somewhere. Pentagram-shaped neon signs flickered, advertising sins he couldn't pronounce. Demons, real, actual demons with twisted limbs, extra eyes, and two wide smiles, drifted through the streets. The air itself seemed to breathe, a hot, wet exhalation that carried the scent of sulfur, cheap perfume, and despair. A laugh echoed from the street below, sharp and joyless. Naruto flinched. It sounded like metal scraping bone. Okay, he thought, his mind shifting into the cold, analytical gear of a Hokage. Trapped. Unknown dimension. Hostile population. No immediate allies. Objective, intel. Then escape. But a cold knot of dread was forming in his gut where the Kyuubi's chakra used to roar. He was alone. Truly, completely alone for the first time since he was a child. The silence in his mind was a screaming void. He tested his chakra. It flowed, but it was wrong. Sluggish. When he formed a simple ram seal, the blue energy that flickered around his hands was tinged with a sickly, phosphorescent yellow at the edges. It hissed where it touched the air, as if reacting to the very atmosphere. A whisper, felt more than heard, brushed against his consciousness, so full of light, let's tarnish it. He dropped the seal. The whisper faded. A door, previously hidden in the shadows of the room, creaked open. No one was there. An invitation. Or a trap. Likely both. Naruto's emotional desire was a physical ache, to find an anchor, a point of light, anything to combat the crushing loneliness. The obstacle was the environment itself, a world designed to corrode hope. The risky decision was simple, leave the room. He stepped into the hall. The wallpaper was a pattern of weeping faces. Their eyes followed him. The carpet muffled his steps, feeling like packed earth over graves. He descended a winding staircase into a grand, decaying lobby. A chandelier made of crystal and what looked like frozen screams hung overhead. And there, in the center, stood a woman. She was blonde, dressed in a red suit, her posture radiating a desperate kind of enthusiasm. Her smile was wide, but it didn't reach her eyes, which held a frantic hope. Beside her, floating slightly, was a small, cyclopean creature scribbling on a clipboard. And we have to emphasize the community aspect. Redemption isn't a solo journey, it's a... The woman, Charlie, stopped. She turned. Saw him. Her face lit up with a genuine, startling brightness. Oh. You're awake. Welcome. I'm Charlie, and this is the Happy Hotel. Well, it's going to be happy. It's a haven for souls seeking redemption and, she faltered, her eyes taking in his torn clothes, the guarded stance of a shinobi, the utterly lost and wary look in his blue eyes. You're new. And you're different. The little creature, Vaggie, buzzed closer, her single eye narrowing. Charlie, be careful. His energy signature, it's not dense. It's layered. And it's glowing weird. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he said, his voice rough from disuse. Where am I? You're in hell, sweetie, chirped a new voice, smooth as silk and static. From the shadows of a nearby radio, darkness pooled and stretched. A tall, thin demon emerged, dressed in red, with a grin that split his face and microphone static crackling around him. His eyes were radio dials, fixed on Naruto. The Pride Ring, to be precise. The Pentagram City. And my, what an interesting broadcast you are. Not on the guest list. A last-minute, unexpected addition to the program. Alaster. The name popped into Naruto's head unbidden, carried on a wave of instinctual revulsion. This thing was a predator. A different kind than he was used to. This one fed on more than flesh. Alaster, don't scare him. Charlie said, stepping slightly between them. Naruto, it's okay. This is a safe place. You're here because, well, you must want to be better, right? Her hope was a fragile, beautiful, dangerous thing. Naruto saw it, recognized it. It was the hope he used to wield like a weapon. But here, it felt thin, a sheet over a bottomless pit. He saw the doubt in Vagi's posture, the sheer, amused avarice in Alaster's stare. Charlie's hope was being tested, and she was failing, and she didn't even know it. I don't belong here, Naruto stated, the Hokage's authority ringing in his tone. It was a risk, asserting identity in a place designed to strip it away. Alaster's grin widened. Oh, but you do. The gate doesn't make mistakes, my dear fellow. You're here for a reason. A sin. A failure. A contract. The last word hung in the air. Naruto thought of the ceiling array. I want to leave, Naruto said, his desire crystallizing. Not just to escape hell, but to escape the implication that he deserved to be here. Of course you do. Charlie said, clasping her hands. And you can. Through redemption. We can help you. There is no leaving, princess, Alaster chuckled, not taking his eyes off Naruto. Only, repurposing. But tell me, orange-clad warrior. What do you feel when you reach for your power here? Naruto didn't want to. But he needed to know. He focused, drawing a tiny thread of chakra to his fingertip. The blue-yellow energy sparked. Immediately, the whispering returned, louder. The weeping faces in the wallpaper strained toward him. The shadows in the corner of the room deepened, forming into vague, laughing shapes that mimicked his posture. His chakra wasn't just being suppressed, it was being observed, and antagonized. He cut the flow. The shadows slumped back, giggling. Alaster's static pitched higher in clear delight. Fascinating. It's alive. And hell hates it. Or, loves it. It's hard to tell with this old place. It wants to play with you, boy. Stop it, Vagi snapped, her spear materializing in her hand. Charlie, this is bad news. He's a lightning rod for, whatever that is. Charlie looked torn, her hope warring with the evidence before her. Naruto saw her internal struggle. She wanted to save him. He was a project, a proof of concept. But he was also undeniably dangerous. Naruto's risky decision came from a place of deep, lonely empathy. He saw her crumbling faith. He, of all people, couldn't be the one to break it. Even here. Even now. I'll stay, he heard himself say. The words felt heavy. I'll learn about your redemption. The consequence was immediate. Alaster's grin became triumphant. Charlie's face flooded with relieved joy. Vagi's suspicion hardened into outright hostility. And from the doorway leading to the bar, a new figure slouched in. Tall, spider-legged, wearing a torn pink gown and a smirk that didn't hide the deadness in his eyes. Angel Dust looked Naruto up and down, his gaze lingering on the tense set of Naruto's jaw, the fists clenched at his sides. He saw a fellow fighter. A fellow prisoner. Great, Angel drawled, voice like smoke and syrup. Another lost cause. This one's even got the tragic hero vibe going. It's gonna be a real downer at party nights. Naruto met Angel's eyes. He didn't see a monster. He saw a profound, weary pain, masked by performance. A reflection of the internal conflict he himself was starting to feel, the urge to fight versus the crushing weight of this place. Charlie was talking, outlining rules, schedules, her voice buoyant again. But Naruto wasn't listening. He was watching Alaster, who had retreated to the shadows by the radio, his dial eyes still fixed on him. The demon raised a clawed finger to his lips in a mock shushing gesture. Then he mouthed, soundlessly, the contract is forming. A cold jolt shot through Naruto. He hadn't agreed to anything. Had he? His agreement to stay, in this place where whispers fed on chakra and smiles hid teeth, was that a form of consent? The chapter ends not with a bang, but with a chilling, quiet realization. Naruto, to preserve a stranger's hope, has just taken his first, unwitting step into a trap. He is not a guest at the Happy Hotel. He is a fascinating new specimen in Alastair's collection, and his very soul energy is an anomaly hell is already beginning to dissect. The loneliness is now compounded by the terrifying sense that he has just voluntarily walked into a cage, and the door is clicking shut behind him. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Static. Peace was a lie here. Naruto had learned that in the Hokage's office, staring at casualty reports. He'd learned it on battlefields that stank of lightning-scorched earth. But hell had a postgraduate degree in the subject. Its peace was an active, chewing thing. His room in the Happy Hotel was less a sanctuary and more a biopsy tray. The weeping faces in the wallpaper had grown more distinct overnight. One, near the window, now bore a faint, whiskered resemblance that made his gut clench. He'd thrown a blanket over it. The fabric seeped a slow, dark stain, like oil, until he took it down. His emotional desire was simple, primal, a moment of true quiet. Not the hum, not the drip, not the distant, carnival scream of the city. A silence where his own thoughts could scream, if they needed to. Where he could remember Irika's voice, or Sakura's punch, or Kakashi's lazy eye smile without the memory curdling at the edges. He tried meditation. Not the formal shinobi kind, but the simple act of sitting cross-legged on the floor, closing his eyes, and breathing. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. The air tasted of cheap incense Charlie had lit, vanilla-scented, a pathetic shield against the sulfur. He reached inward, not for chakra, but for its source. The wellspring of his energy. It was there, deep and vast. But the surface was murky, swirling with that phosphorescent yellow. He imagined dipping a cup into it, drawing up only the clean, blue chakra of his own life force. A single thread, blue and pure, coalesced in his core. For a second, he felt it. The familiar warmth. The hum of his own power. The wall to his left gurgled. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The wallpaper was blistering. A thick, tarry substance, black and iridescent like a cockroach's shell, bubbled from the seam where the wall met the floor. It wasn't liquid. It was too viscous. It wasn't solid. It pulsed. It oozed toward him, an inch at a time, leaving a glistening trail that smoked faintly. The weeping face above it contorted, its painted mouth opening in a soundless shriek of what looked like ecstasy. He severed the chakra thread. The ooze stopped. It quivered, then began a slow, reluctant retreat back into the wall, the trail it left behind evaporating with a hiss like a sigh. "It's tasting you," a voice drawled from the doorway. Naruto was on his feet in a fighter's crouch before his mind fully registered the speaker. Angel Dust leaned against the frame, one set of arms crossed, the other holding a smoldering cigarette. His pink robe was loose, his expression unreadable beneath the usual layer of weary sarcasm. "What was that?" Naruto asked, voice low. "The hotel." "Hell. Same diff." Angel took a long drag. "You put out a signal, sweetie. A clean one. It's like ringing a dinner bell for the things that live in the pipes round here. They like pure. They wanna corrupt it. Makes 'em feel big." Naruto forced himself to relax his stance, but the tension thrummed in his shoulders. "Why aren't you at the community trust exercise?" "Boring. Also, involves touching. And feelings." Angel's eyes, the ones not hidden behind his fluffy white hair, flicked over Naruto. "You're vibrating like a tuned fork. Gonna shake yourself apart if you don't let off some steam." The obstacle was no longer just the environment, it was his own power, turned into a beacon and a toxin. He couldn't use it. He couldn't not use it. It was a part of him, trapped and sick. "What do you suggest?" Naruto asked, hearing the edge in his own voice. He wasn't used to being counseled on control by a spider demon in a bathrobe. But Angel had been here longer. He understood the rules of the cage. A slow, cynical smile spread across Angel's face. It didn't reach his eyes. "I know a place. No holds barred, down and dirty, pound the piss out of someone else kind of place. Legal-ish. Good for venting. They got guys there who could use a good pummeling. Trust me." It was a transparent ploy. A risk. Angel was a creature of vice, and this was a vice invitation. But beneath the performance, Naruto saw something else, a challenge. A test. Let's see what the shiny new toy can really do. The risky decision crystallized. He needed to move, to act, to feel something other than this cloying, observational malevolence. And maybe, just maybe, he could connect with this broken soul who seemed to wear his pain like a costume. Fine. Show me. The place was called The Grind. It was in the basement of a building that listed to the left, its foundations groaning. The air was thick with sweat, stale blood, and the coppery tang of desperation. A ring, cordoned off with chains that looked suspiciously like vertebrae, sat in the center. Around it, a throng of demons of every imaginable shape roared and gambled, exchanging glowing soul coin fragments. The fighters weren't overlords. They were sinners, damned souls so low on the infernal pecking order that fighting for the amusement of others was a step up. Naruto saw a man with a melted face throw a weak punch at a woman with too many teeth. They moved with the sluggish, clumsy anger of the profoundly hopeless. See? Angel yelled over the din, guiding Naruto to a shadowed alcove. Nothing to it. Jump in, take out some trash, feel better. They pay in scrap. Could buy yourself a new shirt. He eyed Naruto's orange jacket. Please. Naruto's stomach turned. This wasn't a training ground. It was exploitation. A circus of despair. His desire to blow off steam evaporated, replaced by a colder, more familiar fire, the need to protect the helpless. In the ring, the melted-face sinner went down hard. The toothy woman stood over him, but there was no triumph in her eyes, only a dull exhaustion. The bookie, a squat demon with a cash register for a head, started counting down, ready to award the paltry prize. I'm not fighting them, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the noise. Demons nearby turned, their interest piqued by the new voice, the strange aura. Angel shrugged. Suit yourself. But the steam's gotta go somewhere. It did. It was going into a sharp, focused point of anger. Not at the fighters, but at the system. At the leering crowd. At this entire fucking city that fed on pain. The bookie finished his count. The winner shuffled to the edge of the ring to collect her few coins. The loser tried to crawl out, one arm dangling uselessly. The bookie kicked him back into the center. Main event needs a warm-up act. Who's next? Fresh meat pays double. A hulking demon, all corded muscle and horns, cracked his knuckles and began to lumber toward the ring. His eyes were on the crawling loser, hungry. Naruto moved. He didn't use the body flicker. His chakra was too volatile. But his shinobi speed, born of decades of conditioning, was enough. He was a blur of orange, vaulting the vertebral chains, landing silently between the hulking demon and the fallen sinner. The crowd roared, confused then delighted. A new contender. The fight's over, Naruto said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the big demon. Leave him alone. The demon laughed, a sound like stones in a dryer. Or what, sunshine? You gonna sing me a hymn? Naruto helped the crawling sinner to his feet, guiding him gently to the edge of the ring. The sinner stared at him with a mix of terror and awe. I said, Naruto turned back, his blue eyes flat and hard, the fight's over. The demon charged. It was a straightforward, brutal lunge. To the crowd, it was terrifying. To a man who had dodged Susanoo swords and tailed beasts, it was a slow-motion pamphlet on poor form. Naruto didn't strike to kill. He struck to incapacitate. A precise, chakra-less punch to the sternum, not enough to break ribs, but to stun the diaphragm. A sweep of the leg. The demon crashed down, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Silence, for a beat. Then the crowd erupted in fury. They hadn't paid to see mercy. They'd paid for blood. Get him, someone shrieked. 3 more demons, emboldened by numbers, surged into the ring. This was the consequence. He'd made himself the target. The risky decision to come here was now a trap closing. He couldn't just walk away. He had to fight. He danced between them, his movements efficient, brutal, and merciful. A pressure point strike here. A joint lock there. He was a storm of controlled violence, disarming and disabling without spilling a drop of infernal blood. But with each movement, with each surge of adrenaline, he felt his control over his chakra slip. The blue energy flickered around his knuckles, and the sickly yellow seeped in at the edges, reacting to his righteous anger. The last demon, a wiry thing with scorpion tails, lunged. Naruto caught the stinger, twisted, and used the demon's momentum to throw him down. As he did, a spark of yellow-tinged chakra leapt from his palm to the demon's carapace. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The demon didn't scream in pain. It screamed in loss. The oily, sin-black color of its shell blanched, fading to a dull, ashen gray in a perfect handprint where Naruto had touched it. The malice in its eyes guttered out, replaced by a second of shocking, vacant clarity, a glimpse of the human soul it once was, naked and horrified, before the hellish nature rushed back in, but weaker, confused. The demon scrambled away from him, clutching its chest, whimpering. The circle of floor where Naruto stood, where his chakra had bled out during the fight, was changed. The stained, grimy concrete was now clean. Not just clean. Sterile. A perfect, 3-meter circle of bare, gray stone, devoid of stain, of essence, of the very character of hell. It was a bald spot in a field of corruption. The crowd's fury died. A new sound took its place, a low, collective murmur of fear and awe. They backed away from the ring, from the clean circle, from the man who didn't just beat demons but changed them. Angel Dust was no longer leaning casually. He was standing straight, all 4 arms limp at his sides, his cigarette forgotten on the floor. His eyes were wide. From the shadows near a broken exit sign, the static of a non-functional wall-mounted radio fizzed to life. A tinny, amused voice whispered from it, audible only to Naruto, "Marvelous. A sanitizing effect. Oh, you are a treat. Alaster." Naruto ignored it. He looked at his hands. The yellow tinge was fading, leaving his normal blue chakra, which now felt thin, depleted. He felt nauseous. He hadn't just fought. He had purged. And the cost, the spiritual weight of it, felt heavy and wrong. The bookie demon with the cash register head was pointing a trembling finger at him, talking frantically into a squawking device. Anomalous power. Cleanse type. Yes, at the grind. Tell the boss. Naruto jumped out of the ring. The crowd parted for him like a sea. He grabbed Angel's arm. "We're leaving. Now." Angel didn't resist. He let himself be pulled through the stunned crowd and out into the alley, his eyes never leaving Naruto's face. The walk back to the hotel was silent. The city's noises seemed muted, respectful, or perhaps just wary. The whispering in the air around Naruto was different now, not mocking, but curious, probing. They reached the hotel's grand, foolishly cheerful doors. Before they could enter, Angel stopped, pulling his arm free. "What?" Angel's voice was uncharacteristically small. "What did you do to him? To the floor?" "I don't know," Naruto answered, and it was the terrifying truth. The door swung open. Charlie stood there, Vaggie poised protectively behind her. Charlie's face was pale. She'd been crying. "We felt a disturbance," Vaggie said, her spear half raised. "A surge of wrong energy." Charlie took a step forward, her eyes searching Naruto's. Not with accusation. With a desperate, heartbreaking hope. She'd heard the bookie's broadcast. She'd felt the ripple. "Naruto," she whispered, her voice trembling with a terrifying possibility. "When you fought, your power. Can it?" She swallowed, the words almost too fragile to speak. "Can your power cleanse sins?" The question hung in the greasy air. It was the logical conclusion. The devastating hope. The ultimate temptation. And the most dangerous burden of all. Micro cliffhanger, from the lobby's grand radio, Alaster's voice crackled to life, smooth and triumphant. "Why, princess? What a positively divine question. Shall we find out?" The radio dials glowed, fixing on Naruto. The experiment had a hypothesis. And Naruto had just become the test subject. Chapter 3, The Serpent's Offer. The silence after Charlie's question was a physical thing. It pressed on Naruto's eardrums, a vacuum where only the hum of the hotel's latent malevolence and the frantic thumping of his own heart existed. Cleanse sins. The words were absurd, sacrilegious, and terrifyingly logical all at once. He'd seen the gray handprint on the demon's chest, the sterile circle on the floor. He'd felt the void where something foul had been scoured away. He looked at Charlie's face, alight with a hope so fervent it bordered on madness. This wasn't just about her hotel anymore. This was about validation. About proof that her father's realm, the very concept of eternal damnation, could be wrong. She was looking at him like he was a messiah wrapped in orange flak jacket. "I don't know what it does," Naruto said, his voice rough. It was the truth, but it felt like a lie. He'd felt the corruption peel back. He'd heard the demon's scream of loss. "It just reacts." Reacts. Charlie breathed the word like a prayer. To sin. To corruption. "Oh, Naruto, don't you see? This could be it. The key. Not just therapy and song, but an actual, tangible." Vaggie put a hand on her shoulder. "Charlie. Stop. Look at him. Her single eye was locked on Naruto, sharp as her spear point. He's scared. He doesn't know. And that, she jabbed a finger towards the door, in the general direction of the grind, just painted the biggest target in Pentagram City on our backs. Every 2-bit overlord with a dirty secret is gonna want a piece of him, or want him gone. Angel Dust finally slouched past them into the lobby, throwing himself onto a plush chaise along that side in protest. The spider's right, toots. You start advertising a miracle stain remover in a town made of stains, you're gonna get a line out the door. And not the friendly kind. He lit a new cigarette with a trembling hand. The bravado was back, but it was brittle. Naruto's emotional desire was no longer for quiet. It was for understanding. He was a weapon in a war he didn't understand, and the first rule of shinobi combat was to know your tools. He couldn't afford to be a passive experiment, reacting to hell's provocations. He needed to master the reaction. To control the signal, as Alastor had put it. The very thought of seeking that monster's counsel made his skin crawl, but the alternative, being a walking, unpredictable purification bomb, was worse. The obstacle was twofold, the terrifying unknown of his own power, and the smiling demon who seemed to understand it. As if summoned by the thought, the static rose. It didn't come from the radio this time. It emanated from the chandelier, from the dust motes in the air, from the very grain of the wood in the floorboards. A faint, discordant jazz tune woven from white noise. Control, a voice purred from the top of the staircase. Alastor stood there, one hand on the banister, his head tilted. That is the heart of the issue, is it not? You are a magnificent, blaring trumpet in a world of whispered lies. You cannot help but draw attention. And attention, in hell, is currency. Or a death sentence. Charlie visibly steeled herself. Alastor, we're not turning him into a tool. My dear princess, he already is a tool. A divine chisel fallen into an infernal workshop. The question is who wields him. Alastor's dial eyes clicked softly, focusing on Naruto. At present, he wields himself. And he is, with all due respect, all thumbs. The insult was deliberate. A prod. Naruto felt the old, hot flare of temper. Who does this static-ridden bastard think he is? But he clamped down on it. Anger made the yellow chakra seep. Anger made him unpredictable. You said you could help me control it, Naruto said, his tone flat. How? Alastor's grin was a crescent moon of razors. By understanding what you are tapping into. This is not some mere moral alignment, my boy. This is fundamental reality. Hell is a dimension built on a substrate of specific sins, specific energies. Your chakra, your life force, is an alien substance here. It does not play by our rules. It rewrites them, locally, temporarily, and with all the subtlety of a volcanic eruption. He descended the stairs, each step silent. You need to learn to modulate your broadcast. To aim it. To use a scalpel, not a, what was it? A Rasengan? Naruto went cold. He'd never said the name of the technique aloud here. Alastor's chuckle was a record skipping. Oh, I have my ways of tuning in. The point is, you are leaking power. And in a place where power is the only law, that makes you a walking buffet. Let me teach you to close the kitchen. The risky decision loomed. Trusting Alastor was insanity. The demon's agenda was a locked box wrapped in barbed wire. But he was the only one who didn't seem frightened or blindly hopeful. He was fascinated. And a fascinated scientist might, for a time, keep his specimen intact to study. One lesson, Naruto said. Supervised. No contracts. No deals. You show me the principle. Then I decide. Charlie made a noise of protest. Vaggy's grip tightened on her spear. Angel just blew a smoke ring, his eyes guarded. Alastor clapped his hands once, the sound sharp and final. Splendid. A tutorial. Follow me, my intriguing pupil. We require a sterile environment. Or rather, an environment where the consequences of failure will be minimally catastrophic. He led Naruto not out of the hotel, but deeper into it, down a back staircase Naruto hadn't noticed before. It wound down into a cold, stone-walled basement that smelled of damp earth and old radio tubes. At the far end was a heavy metal door, etched with faint, warding symbols that made Naruto's eyes water to look at. My personal listening booth, Alastor said, waving a hand. The door swung open silently. Soundproofed. Warded against eavesdropping from certain meddling parties. And, most importantly, a null zone for ambient infernal energy. Here, the background corruption is reduced to a bare minimum. It will give us a clean slate. The room inside was small, circular, and lined with dark, sound-absorbing material. In the center was a single, straight-backed chair. It felt less like a study and more like an isolation chamber. "Sit," Alastor instructed, his voice losing its performative warmth, becoming clinical. Naruto sat, back straight, senses screaming. This was a trap. It had to be. Alastor stood before him, his shadow stretching up the wall, becoming a vast, antlered silhouette that did not match his physical form. "Now. Reach for your chakra. Not to use it. Just to feel its source. Its flavor." Warily, Naruto closed his eyes. In the null zone, the constant psychic pressure of hell was muted. It was a relief, like removing a weight from his chest. He found his inner wellspring more easily. The blue was clearer here, though the yellow taint still swirled beneath, like oil on water. "I feel it," he muttered. "Good. Now, instead of drawing it up, I want you to listen to it. In this quiet place, what does it want to do? Does it want to expand? To defend? To purify?" Naruto listened. The chakra hummed. It felt restless. Angry. It felt like him. It wanted to push back against the wrongness, to scream its existence into the void. "It wants to fight," he said. "Excellent. A martial spirit. Now, direct that desire. Not outwards. Inwards. Shape it. Contain it. Imagine it as a sphere in your palm. Not a weapon. A concept. The concept of no. A sphere. A Rasengan. It was the most basic shape he knew. He pictured it, not the raging vortex of destruction, but a perfect, still orb of blue light. He guided a thread of chakra to his right palm, visualizing containment. The blue energy flickered, coalesced. For a second, a tiny, stable sphere of pure blue light hovered above his palm. It cast a soft, clean glow in the dark room. Alastor let out a soft, appreciative hum. "Marvelous. Now, introduce the variable." "What variable?" "The taint, my boy. The yellow. The reaction. You've been treating it as a contamination. What if it is a translation layer? A filter that allows your foreign energy to interact with local physics? Do not reject it. Invite it into the sphere." This felt profoundly wrong. It was like being told to welcome poison into his bloodstream. But the logic was cold and sound. His pure chakra was inert here, save for its cleansing effect. The yellow was the interactivity. The key. Gritting his teeth, Naruto willed the swirling yellow energy from the depths of his wellspring to rise. It came eagerly, hungrily. It snaked up the channel of his chakra and touched the blue sphere. The effect was immediate and violent. The sphere convulsed. The clean blue was invaded by pulsing veins of sickly yellow. It wasn't a mix. It was a battle. The sphere shuddered, growing unstable, and a low, subaudible whine began to emanate from it. The sound drilled into Naruto's teeth. "Steady." Alastor's voice was sharp, no longer amused. "Hold the shape. Force them to coexist. This is the heart of control." Naruto poured his will into it. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He was a master of chakra control, but this was like trying to braid water and fire. The sphere grew, not with his intent, but with its own chaotic energy. It was the size of a grapefruit now, a churning maelstrom of blue and yellow, the whine escalating to a shriek. The room's wards began to glow a feverish red. The sound-absorbing walls trembled. "It's breaking containment." Naruto gasped. The energy was feeding on itself, on his struggle, on the very nullification of the room. "Then give it a target." Alastor hissed. His eyes were wide, dials spinning wildly. He wasn't afraid. He was rapturous. "Aim it. At the far wall. Imagine not destroying it, but editing it." Naruto had no choice. He couldn't hold it. With a grunt of effort, he thrust his palm forward, not to throw the sphere, but to release the contained concept. The unstable orb didn't fly. It unraveled. A beam of spiraling blue-yellow energy lanced across the room and struck the far wall. It didn't explode. It didn't cleanse. It unmade. The sound-absorbing material, the stone behind it, the very space itself, dissolved in a silent, shimmering wave. Not into dust. Into a patch of swirling, colorless static. A hole in reality. Through it, Naruto didn't see another room or hellscape. He saw a vast, infinite nothingness. A cosmic void, cold and empty. And in that void, points of light that were not stars, but eyes. Thousands of them, distant and impossibly ancient, all turning to focus on the tiny tear in the fabric of hell. A wave of sheer, existential dread, a loneliness so profound it made the silence of the Kyuubi's absence feel cozy, washed over him. It was the feeling of being a microbe on a slide, under the gaze of something that had forgotten what life was. Alastor staggered back, his smile gone, his static screeching in discordant alarm. He stared at the tear, at the watching eyes, with an expression Naruto had never seen on him, raw, unfiltered recognition. And terror. Then, from the void, something drifted through the tear. A single, pristine, white feather. It spiraled down slowly, defying the non-laws of the null zone, and landed on the floor between them with a soft, impossible plink. The tear snapped shut. The room was just a room again, save for a perfect, smooth, hemispherical scoop missing from the wall, edges glassy as if melted by absolute zero. The wine was gone. The only sound was Naruto's ragged breathing and the frantic crackle of Alastor's aura. The radio demon stared at the feather as if it were a live viper. All his smug superiority had evaporated. His shadow shrank back to its normal size, quivering. He looked from the feather to Naruto, his grin returning, but now it was a grim, tight slash across his face. The amusement was dead. What remained was a cold, calculating urgency. He took a careful step forward, not towards Naruto, but towards the feather. He didn't touch it. He leaned down, his static hiss a low, furious whisper. Well, Alastor spat, the word laced with static. That was rather more effective than anticipated. He straightened, his dial eyes locking onto Naruto with terrifying intensity. You've done it now, my bright little spark. You haven't just drawn the attention of petty overlords. He gestured a clawed hand at the white feather, a object of impossible purity lying on the hellish floor. You've gone and got heaven's attention. How dreadfully, catastrophically inconvenient. Micro cliffhanger. Before Naruto could process this, the basement door burst open. Charlie stood there, Vaggie behind her, both panting. We felt a rupture. Charlie cried out. Then her eyes fell on the white feather. All the color drained from her face. She knew what it was. Her father had 1,000 like them, locked away like shameful relics. She looked at Naruto, her hope now mingled with sheer terror. What did you do? Next. Chapter 4, A King in Gilded Chains. The white feather lay between them, an accusation in plume form. It wasn't just white, it was absolutely white, a shade that seemed to leach the color from the dim basement around it. It hummed with a faint, antiseptic energy that made the back of Naruto's throat itch. Heaven's attention. It sounded like salvation. The look on Charlie's face said it was anything but. What did you do? Charlie's whisper was frayed at the edges, her earlier hope now a shattered vessel leaking dread. Alastor recovered first, his static smoothing into a low, ominous purr. He gestured, and a tendril of shadow snatched the feather, not touching it directly, and deposited it into the inside pocket of his coat. It vanished with a sizzle, like ice on a hot stove. What he did, princess, is demonstrate a capacity for dimensional incursion. A rather noisy one. The higher management tends to notice when someone starts poking holes in the prison walls. You told him to do it. Vaggie snarled, spear pointed at Alastor's chest. I provided a theory. The boy's unique chemistry is what provided the explosive result. Alastor's smile was back, but it was thin, strained. His eyes kept darting to the spot where the tear had been. He was scared. The realization hit Naruto like a splash of cold water. The unflappable radio demon was genuinely frightened of what had just peered through. Naruto stood, his legs shaky from chakra drain and psychic aftershock. The void, the eyes, the loneliness there had been oceanic, making hell's corrupted warmth feel almost hospitable. I need answers, he said, his voice hollow. Not theories. Not cryptic warnings. What is this place? Why am I here? Charlie hugged herself, a child's gesture. I told you. It's hell. You sinned, you. I didn't, Naruto cut her off, the Hokage's steel returning to his tone. He'd replayed the ceiling array in his mind 1,000 times. The spirals, the pull. It was a trap. An accident. I was pulled. He looked at Alastor. You called it a broadcast. You called me an addition to the program. You know something. Alastor shrugged, a jerky motion. The gears of damnation grind exceedingly fine, and sometimes they catch a pebble that shouldn't be there. You are that pebble. A fascinating, disruptive pebble, but a pebble nonetheless. It was a non-answer. A dismissal. Naruto felt the familiar, hot rise of frustration. He was done being talked around. He was done being a patient in this asylum of smiling madmen and broken souls. His emotional desire crystallized into a single, sharp point: authority. He needed to speak to whoever was in charge. Not a hopeful princess, not a scheming radio host. The king. "I want to see Lucifer," Naruto announced. The reaction was immediate and profound. Charlie flinched as if struck. Vagi's spear wavered. Alastair's static spiked into a brief screech of feedback before he forced it down, his grin becoming a grimace of genuine irritation. "No," Charlie said, the word small but firm. "That's not a good idea. He's my father, he's complicated," she amended, wringing her hands. "He doesn't like visitors. He doesn't like problems." "I am a problem," Naruto stated flatly. "One that just tore a whole reality and got a fan letter from heaven. I think that qualifies for the boss's attention." He turned his gaze on Alastair. "You said this was his domain. I want to hear from the landlord why there's a clause in the lease that snatches people from other worlds." Alastair studied him, the calculative gleam returning to his dials. An audience with the Morning Star. How bold. And potentially amusing. He does so despise being dragged from his distractions. "Naruto, please," Charlie pleaded, stepping forward. "He won't help you. He'll just make things worse. He's not what you expect." "What I expect," Naruto said, feeling the weight of the feather in his mind if not his pocket, "is that everyone in this hotel is operating on half-truths and desperate guesses. I need a source." The source. He looked at Charlie's devastated face and felt a pang of guilt. She had shown him kindness, however misguided. "This isn't about your hotel, Charlie. This is about me going home." The obstacle was monumental, the entrenched reluctance of everyone around him, the terrifying unknown of the King of Hell himself, and his own depleted, unstable power. He had no summons, no diplomatic missive. He had only his will. He made the risky decision. He would not ask for an invitation. He would demand an audience. In Konoha, when a Kage needed to send an urgent, undeniable message, there were seals, there were summons. Here, he had only his aberrant chakra and a desperate hypothesis. If his energy could scream through the layers of hell when he was angry, maybe he could aim a quieter, more pointed signal. He walked past them, back up the stairs to the main lobby. He ignored their protests, their following footsteps. He went to the grand, filthy window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, in that impossible spire that pierced the bruised sky, was the ruler. He closed his eyes. He reached for his chakra, not the turbulent mix, but the core of his own will, the unbreakable, stubborn essence that had faced down gods and despair. He didn't shape it into a weapon. He shaped it into a message. A beacon of self, of identity, of a sovereign will from another world. He imagined it as a spear of pure intent, not seeking to cleanse or destroy, but to announce. Uzumaki Naruto. 7th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf. Wrongfully taken. Demands parley. He pushed. His chakra didn't flare yellow or blue. It sparked a brilliant, defiant gold, the color of his father's hair, of his own unwavering spirit. It shot from him not as a beam, but as a silent, psychic pulse. The window pane didn't crack. The air didn't distort. But every demon on the street below suddenly clutched their heads, a wave of disorienting, foreign presence washing over them. In the hotel, Vagi cried out, dropping her spear. Charlie gasped. Alastair's static flatlined into dead air for a full 3 seconds. The pulse rocketed out, a ripple in the metaphysical fabric of pride. It arrowed unerringly towards the tallest spire. For a long moment, nothing. Then, the consequence. The air in front of Naruto warped. Not a portal, but a localized bending of reality, as if space itself was a sheet being pinched. From that pinch, a single, elegant, black and red calling card materialized and fluttered to the floor at his feet. On it, in gilded, looping script, was written. "Fine. You have 5 minutes. Don't touch the ducks." A sensation of unbearable vertigo seized him. The lobby, Charlie's cry, Alastair's suddenly furious glare, all of it dissolved into a whirl of screaming color and soundless motion. It was like the reverse summoning technique, but without the safety of a contractual bond. He was being wrenched. He landed on his knees, hard, on a polished white floor. The air was cool, dry, and smelled of lemon polish, lacquer, and a faint, underlying scent of rubber. He looked up. He was in a long, impossibly bright gallery. The walls were white, adorned with tastefully lit abstract paintings that seemed to swirl with trapped anguish if you looked at them too long. At the far end, bathed in light from a massive window that showed a breathtaking, horrifying vista of all the rings of hell sprawled like a diseased jewel below, was a man at an easel. He was shorter than Naruto expected. Dressed in a crisp, white tailcoat with red accents, his blonde hair impeccably coiffed. He had his back to him, humming a tuneless, jaunty little melody as he dabbed a brush on a canvas. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, his body protesting. "Lucifer?" The king of hell didn't turn. "You're using up your minutes," he sang, his voice light, melodious, and utterly devoid of warmth. "And you've tracked existential angst on my clean floor. Rude." Naruto strode forward, his boots clicking on the marble. "I need to know how to get home." Lucifer dabbed a spot of red on the canvas. It was a painting of a solitary, sad-looking rubber duck floating in a void. "Home," he mused. "Such a subjective concept. Is it a place? A people? A feeling? I had a home once. Very bright. Very harmonious. Dreadfully boring." He finally turned. His face was handsome, youthful, but his eyes were ancient. They held a depth of weary, cynical melancholy that made Naruto's own struggles feel like toddler tantrums. There was no cosmic malice there. Only a profound, creative frustration and a bottomless well of disappointment. "You're Naruto," Lucifer stated, not a question. He set his brush down and picked up a half-finished, miniature duck sculpture from a workbench littered with tools and tiny wings. The pebble in the gearbox. Charlie's new pet project. Alastair's new toy. My daughter has a bleeding heart the size of a planet, and that deer-headed nuisance has the attention span of a gnat with cosmic ambitions. You, though, you're simpler. You're a man who believes in willpower." He said the word like it was a mildly amusing fungus. "Willpower got me here," Naruto said, holding the ancient gaze. "It'll get me out." Lucifer laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. It wasn't cruel. It was pitying. "Oh, my dear boy. No, it won't. Your willpower is what made you a viable conduit. The trap you stumbled into? It wasn't meant for a soul. It was a snare for a concept, raw, unbending defiance. A little failsafe upstairs for things that get too independently minded. You just happened to be the juiciest bit of defiance in the vicinity when it triggered." He began sanding a tiny seam on the duck's back with infinite, sad care. "You didn't sin your way here. You were collected. Like a interesting bug." The explanation landed like a physical blow. A weapon. A cosmic bug zapper. He was an accident. A side effect. "Then there's a way to reverse it," Naruto pressed, desperation seeping into his voice. "A counterseal. A release clause." "There's always a clause," Lucifer sighed, as if this was the most tedious part. "But it's not in any contract you signed. It's in the fine print of reality. The balance. A soul taken must be accounted for. Or replaced." He finally looked up from his duck, his eyes sharpening. "You're creating an imbalance, Naruto. Your shiny, cleansing chakra is an anomaly. You're drawing eyes from places that haven't blinked in eons. You're making waves." He said the last word with a slow, deliberate gravity. "And I have spent millennia carefully calming the waters. This is my domain. My masterpiece." He gestured vaguely at the horrific, beautiful vista beyond the window. "It is flawed. It is cruel. It is mine. And I will not have an uninvited guest with the metaphysical equivalent of a power washer disrupting the aesthetic." Naruto's hope, a frail thing, began to crumble. This wasn't a tyrant. This was a depressed artist protecting his dysfunctional magnum opus. "So you won't help me?" "Help you?" Lucifer's eyebrows rose. "I'm giving you the only help that matters, truth. Stop making waves. Play along with Charlie's little redemption fantasy. Let Alastair have his fun, he'll get bored eventually, they always do. Be a good little anomaly. Fade into the background noise of suffering. It's the only way to survive here." The risky decision had led to the ultimate consequence, not a path home, but a confirmation of his ultimate irrelevance and danger. He was a stain on the canvas of hell, and the artist wanted him to stop moving so he could paint over him. "And if I can't?" Naruto asked, his voice low. Lucifer's expression cooled. The melancholy hardened into something imperious and distant. "Then you become a problem for the management. And I deal with problems." He set the duck down and picked up his brush again, turning his back. The audience was over. Alastair is playing a game where you are the queen, you know. A powerful piece. Dramatic. But in the end, he made a soft, flicking motion with his wrist, as if brushing a piece from a board. "Queens are sacrificed. 5 minutes are up. Don't call again. The reception is terrible. The vertigo seized Naruto once more. The white gallery, the smell of rubber, the slumped shoulders of the fallen angel, all vanished. He stumbled, landing back in the hotel lobby, nearly colliding with the radio console. Charlie and Vaggie were right where he'd left them, staring at him with wide eyes. Alastor was closer, his head cocked, listening to the fading echoes of the dimensional transfer in the static. Well? Alastor asked, his voice deceptively light. Was His Majesty suitably unhelpful? Naruto didn't answer. He felt hollowed out. The King of Hell was a reclusive craftsman, and he was a splatter on his workshop floor. No salvation. No grand design. Just a mistake that was inconveniencing a very powerful, very bored entity. He looked at Charlie, her face pleading for any shred of good news. He had none. He had only a heavier burden. He was on his own. More alone than ever. Then, from the large window, a shadow fell. Not a cloud. The bruise-colored sky didn't have clouds. This was a deliberate, moving blot. They all turned. Floating just beyond the property line of the Happy Hotel, hovering in the air with pristine, white wings that seemed to reject the very light of hell, were 3 figures. They wore sleek, form-fitting white armor, their faces blank, golden visors covering their eyes. They held gleaming, golden spears. They made no move to approach. They didn't speak. They simply hovered, in perfect, silent formation. And as one, all 3 visored heads turned. Their gaze was not on the hotel. Not on Charlie. It was fixed, with unnerving precision, on Naruto Uzumaki through the window. Heaven's attention had arrived. And it was not offering salvation. It was standing watch. Micro cliffhanger, Alastor's static crackled with a new, frenetic energy. Ah. The inspectors are here. Right on schedule. He looked at Naruto, his grin all teeth. I do hope you filled out your paperwork correctly, my boy. Their audits are notoriously final. Next. Chapter 5, Reflection in a Broken Mirror. The exorcists didn't move. They were statues of polished threat, their silent vigil more unnerving than any shouted challenge. They were a visual punctuation mark to Lucifer's warning, you are a problem for the management. For 3 days, they were a constant. A white smudge in the periphery. Naruto would wake, look out his window, and see one floating at a different corner of the hotel's airspace, always watching. They never slept. They never blinked. Vaggie had taken to patrolling the hallways with her spear at the ready, a silent fury in her single eye. Charlie's hopeful energy had curdled into a brittle, anxious cheer. She'd start a song, then trail off, her gaze drifting to the window. Angel Dust was the only one who seemed unchanged, but his performance had grown more manic, his laughter sharper, his barbs more pointed. Naruto saw through it. The spider demon was a raw nerve, and the silent heavenly sentinels were pressing on it. On the 4th day, Angel didn't come down for breakfast. Or lunch. Naruto found him in his room, which was a chaotic nest of feather boas, empty bottles, and the cloying scent of cheap perfume and cheaper despair. Angel was sitting on the edge of his heart-shaped bed, still in last night's rumpled outfit. He was staring at a small, ornate contract written on what looked like vellum made from tanned skin. His hands, all 4 of them, were trembling. What's that? Naruto asked from the doorway. Angel flinched, then tried to slip the contract under a pillow. His smirk was a ghastly thing. Nothin'. Just some light readin'. The terms and conditions of eternal damnation. Real page-turner. Naruto entered, ignoring the clutter. He'd seen this look before, on shinobi before a suicide mission, on villagers who'd lost everything. It was the look of someone walking to the gallows. Angel. Don't, Angel snapped, the word cracking. He stood up, pacing, his spider legs clicking on the floor. Just don't, okay? You got your own divine stalker boy problems. You don't need mine. Tell me. It wasn't a request. It was the quiet, implacable tone of a Hokage who had seen too many soldiers break. It was the tone that promised, against all odds, to share the burden. Angel stopped. He looked at Naruto, and for a fleeting second, the mask of cynical seduction fell away completely. What was left was terror. Pure, unadulterated terror. He sank back onto the bed, his shoulders slumping. It's Valentino, he whispered, the name a curse. My boss. Overlord. Pimp. Take your pick. My contract's up for renewal. He gestured weakly at the hidden parchment. The old one was bad. This new one, it's forever. No outs. He owns every part of me, in every way. Body, soul, fuckin', memories. His voice hitched. And he summoned me for a signing party. Tonight. At the studio. Naruto's emotional desire, which had been a swirling mess of escape and survival, snapped into a laser focus: protect this person. He saw himself in Angel's eyes, not the sin, but the chains. The chains of fate, of hatred, of a village's scorn. He had broken his. He would break Angel's. Don't go, Naruto said. Angel barked a laugh that was half a sob. And then what? He finds me. He always finds me. He'll tear this place apart, and he'll make me watch. Then he'll take me anyway. There's no don't go. There's only go willingly or go screaming. There's a third option, Naruto said, his mind already moving, calculating. The obstacle was immense, an overlord, a being of immense demonic power backed by infernal law. A direct assault was suicide. His chakra was a wild card, but against a contract-bound entity in its own domain? He remembered the gray handprint, the sterile circle. His power didn't work on the demon's body. It worked on the corruption itself. On the sin that bound them. What? Angel asked, a sliver of desperate hope in his voice. You gonna storm the castle, Blondie? That's sweet. Really? You'd get turned into a orange-colored stain on the welcome mat. Not storm, Naruto said. Retrieve. I'm not going to fight Valentino. He met Angel's eyes. I'm going to get you out. And I'm going to give you a choice. A real one. It was insanity. The ultimate risky decision. It was violating every rule of this hellish society. It was inviting the wrath of an overlord directly onto the hotel. It was making another wave, the biggest one yet. But looking at Angel Dust, at the broken man named Anthony who lived beneath the glitter and grit, Naruto knew he had no other choice. To stand by while someone was enslaved, after everything he'd fought for? That would be the real damnation. He didn't tell Charlie. She would try to stop him, or worse, insist on coming. He didn't tell Vaggie. She would see it as a catastrophic provocation. He especially didn't tell Alastair, whose static had been humming with a peculiar, anticipatory frequency since the exorcists arrived. He waited until the purple twilight deepened into full, velvet night. He wore dark clothes borrowed from the hotel's lost and found, a mismatched black shirt and trousers. He looked at his orange jacket, folded on his bed. His symbol. He left it. Tonight, he wasn't the seventh Hokage. He was a shadow. Where is the studio? He asked Angel, who was watching him, paralyzed between fear and a terrifying, fragile trust. Angel gave him directions, his voice a monotone. It's a fortress. Guards. Wards. Cameras everywhere. He'll see you coming. Let him, Naruto said. He wasn't planning on stealth in the conventional sense. He was planning on a very specific kind of misdirection. Valentino's studio, the Velvet Veil, was a towering Art Deco nightmare of pink neon and black steel. Music with a heavy, predatory bass thumped from within. Naruto stood in an alley across the street, observing. Demons in garish finery came and went. Large, thuggish bouncers with too many eyes patrolled the doors. He closed his eyes. He reached for his chakra, not for power, but for sensation. He pushed a thin, delicate thread of it outward, letting it taste the air around the studio. It recoiled instantly. The place was a nexus of specific, potent sins: lust, exploitation, ownership. The energy was thick, clingy, and possessive. It felt like walking into a spider's web made of addiction. Perfect. He focused his will. He wasn't here to cleanse the whole building. He was here to be a scalpel. He imagined his chakra as a thin, precise blade, honed not on destruction, but on severing. The concept of binding. The concept of ownership. He drew the blade back and, with all his mental strength, thrust it towards the studio's main doors. There was no explosion. No flash of light. But the two bouncers at the door suddenly stumbled, clutching their heads as if hearing a high-pitched whine. The complex web of demonic wards over the entrance shimmered visible for a second, a lattice of glowing pink lines, and at the point where Naruto's mental blade struck, a single line fizzled and went dark. Not broken. Numbed. Temporarily inert. It was a pinprick. But it was an alarm. Klaxons didn't blare. Instead, a sultry, annoyed voice purred from hidden speakers. A little moth is tapping at my window. How quaint. Find it. Bring it to me. I want to see its wings up close. Valentino. Guards poured from side doors, fanning out. Naruto waited until a group of 3 rushed into his alley. He moved. They were brutes, all muscle and rage. He was a ghost. A chop to the throat, a sweep of the legs, a precise pressure point strike. They were unconscious in seconds, their hellish strength irrelevant against precision and speed. He dragged them deeper into the shadows. He repeated the process twice more, creating a trail of silenced alarms and unconscious guards leading away from the studio's side entrance. A classic shinobi diversion. While the main force hunted a phantom in the back alleys, Naruto slipped to the side door. The ward here was weaker, designed to keep people in, not out. His chakra, still focused on that sharp, severing intent, brushed against it. The ward resisted, then parted with a sound like tearing silk, leaving a faint smell of ozone and regret. He was in. The interior was a sensory assault. Throbbing music, lurid red light, the smell of sweat, perfume, and something metallic. He moved through back hallways, following Angel's whispered directions past dressing rooms where hollow-eyed sinners adjusted costumes. He ignored them. His target was the penthouse office. He found the private elevator. It was guarded by a single, elegant demon with moth wings and a razor-blade smile. "The boss is expecting a guest," she hissed. Naruto didn't have time for subtlety. A quick feint, a disarming strike that sent her razor-blade cane clattering, and a careful fist to the temple. She slumped. He keyed the elevator call button. The ascent was silent, the mirrored walls reflecting a grim, determined face he barely recognized. The doors opened directly into an opulent, circular office. It was a monument to vanity and control. One wall was all window, overlooking the city. Another was covered in framed contracts. At the center, behind a massive white desk, sat Valentino. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a white fur-trimmed coat, a cigarette holder in one hand. His 4 red eyes glowed with lazy, amused malice. And standing before the desk, looking small and broken, was Angel Dust. "Ah," Valentino purred, his voice a toxic honey. "The moth has arrived. And it's even more vibrant than I'd heard." His eyes raked over Naruto. "You've caused quite a stir, little spark. Interfering with my property." "He's not property," Naruto said, his voice calm. He kept his eyes on Angel, who was staring at him, wide-eyed, shaking his head in a silent no. "Everything here is property," Valentino chuckled, taking a long drag. "Including you, now that you've trespassed. That's a clause, you know. Standard acquisition protocol." He pushed a second contract across the desk towards Naruto. "Sign this, and your punishment for breaking in will be employment. Refuse, and I'll peel your willpower from your soul layer by layer and use it as confetti." Naruto ignored the contract. He took a step forward. "Angel. Come with me." Angel trembled. He looked from Naruto to Valentino, who was smiling indulgently. "He can't," Valentino said. "He's bound. By words. By law. By me." He tapped the original contract on his desk. "This isn't paper, sunshine. It's reality. His reality. The consequence of his raid was here. Not in guards, but in this absolute, infernal law. He couldn't just knock Valentino out. The contract would remain. Unless." Naruto focused. He looked not at Valentino, but at the space between Valentino and Angel. He pushed his senses out with his strange chakra. And he saw it. Not with his eyes, but with his soul. 1,000 glistening, pink threads, thin as spider silk but strong as adamantium, connecting Valentino to Angel. Threads of ownership, of addiction, of forced devotion. They pulsed with a sickly power. They were the physical manifestation of the contract. His cleansing power didn't work on Valentino's body. But what about the threads? He raised a hand, not in attack, but in a gesture of severance. He pulled his chakra to his palm, focusing on that single, sharp concept, cut. Blue energy, streaked with defiant gold and that unsettling yellow, sparked. It didn't form a sphere. It formed a thin, humming line of light, like the edge of a chakra scalpel. Valentino's smile vanished. "What are you?" Naruto swung his hand in a wide, horizontal arc, not at anyone, but through the space between them. The chakra blade passed through the glowing pink threads. They didn't snap. They dissolved. Where the blade touched, the threads turned to gray ash and vanished, unraveling back towards Valentino with a sound like 1,000 tiny screams. Valentino roared, clutching his chest as if physically wounded. The connection was his power, his sustenance. Angel gasped, staggering back as the invisible bonds holding him taut were suddenly, shockingly gone. He looked at his hands, then at Valentino, then at Naruto, utter disbelief on his face. No! Valentino bellowed, surging to his feet. His form rippled, growing larger, more insectoid, forearms spreading wide. You can't. That's mine. But the damage was done. The contract wasn't destroyed, the parchment on the desk still existed, but its active, binding power over Angel had been severed. It was a legal document with no enforcement clause. The door, Angel, Naruto said, his voice strained. The focused effort had drained him. The yellow in his chakra was boiling now, reacting to the massive, concentrated sin in the room. Angel didn't need to be told twice. He bolted for the elevator. Naruto backed after him, keeping his eyes on the enraged overlord. Valentino didn't chase. He stopped at the edge of his desk, his fury suddenly condensing into something cold and terrifying. He looked at the severed threads fading into nothing, then at Naruto. A slow, horrific smile spread across his face. Fine, Valentino whispered, the word dripping with venomous promise. Take the trash. But you just signed a different contract, you orange bastard. You touched what's mine. You took it. He pointed a clawed finger at Naruto. That means you assume the debt. All of it. Every obligation. Every clause. You belong to me now. The words landed like a curse. Naruto felt a cold, metaphysical click, as if a lock had just turned in the fabric of his own soul. He had severed Angel's chains, and in the perverse logic of hell, he had slipped his own neck into the noose. He stumbled into the elevator just as Valentino's form began to shimmer with gathered power. The doors closed. The ride down was silent. Angel was breathing in ragged, disbelieving gulps. Naruto leaned against the wall, feeling the new, greasy weight settling into his spiritual core. A debt. An obligation. They burst out of the studio and into the night, running for the hotel. They didn't speak until they were back in the lobby, collapsing just inside the doors. Charlie and Vaggie came running. Where have you been? The exorcists, they. Charlie stopped, seeing Angel's shell-shocked face, Naruto's exhaustion. Angel looked up at Charlie, then at Naruto. The fear was still there, but underneath was something new, raw, and terrifying. Not gratitude. Dependency. A salvation he never believed possible. He got me out, Angel whispered. Vaggie's eyes went to Naruto. How? What did you do? Before Naruto could answer, Alastor materialized from the shadow of the radio, his static a low, satisfied hum. He'd been listening. He'd known. Why, I do believe our valiant guest has just performed a hostile takeover of a spiritual contract. Alastor announced, his grin wider than ever. He didn't just free our arachnid friend. He absorbed the liability. He walked over to Naruto and leaned down, his dial eyes spinning. Congratulations. You're no longer just an anomaly. You're a debtor. And Valentino holds the note. He chuckled. This is going to be delicious. Micro cliffhanger, Naruto looked at his hands. The yellow tinge in his chakra had deepened, and now, faint, glowing pink lines, like the ghost of Valentino's threads, were etched across his palms, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He hadn't just made a wave. He had swallowed the ocean, and it was starting to digest him from the inside out. Angel was free. But Naruto had never been more bound. Next. Chapter 6, The Sinner's Sermon. The pink lines were a phantom itch Naruto couldn't scratch. They weren't on his skin, they were in it, a subtle, luminous tattoo mapping a debt he couldn't quantify. When he flexed his hand, they shimmered. When he drew chakra, they burned with a cold, possessive fire that made the yellow corruption in his energy coil and hiss in protest. Valentino's signature was on his soul. The hotel had become a gilded cage under siege. The three exorcists still floated outside, their silent vigil now feeling less like observation and more like a prelude. Inside, the atmosphere was fracturing. Vaggie's hostility towards Naruto had solidified into something hard and strategic. He was no longer just dangerous, he was an active liability who had declared war on an overlord. Charlie vacillated between tending to a now catatonic Angel Dust, who followed Naruto with the eyes of a rescued dog waiting to be kicked, and wringing her hands over the heavenly audience just beyond her windows. Alastor was the only one who seemed genuinely delighted. His radio broadcasts from the hotel took on a new, gossipy tone, hinting at upheavals in the status quo and interesting new players on the board. He watched Naruto like a chef watching a particularly volatile soufflé. Naruto's emotional desire had morphed. Escape felt distant, abstract. The pink lines were a chain he couldn't see the end of. His new, desperate need was to protect the fragile sanctuary around him from the disasters he kept causing. He had to get the exorcists away from the hotel. He had to draw Valentino's fire onto himself, and himself alone. He was a shinobi. He was the Hokage. It was his job to be the shield. He stood at the window, watching the nearest exorcist. It turned its visored head, meeting his gaze with blank, golden indifference. It was waiting. For what? The answer came not with a bang, but with a chime. A single, pure, bell-like note rang through the lobby, so clean it seemed to scour the air of dust. A rectangle of white light, tall as a door, manifested in the center of the room. From it stepped a single figure. She was an exorcist, but unlike the silent drones outside. Her armor was more ornate, etched with severe, geometric patterns. She carried no spear. Her wings, folded neatly behind her, were a sharper, colder white. And her face was visible, severe, handsome, with pale blonde hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes the color of a frozen lake. She held herself with the effortless authority of a principal visiting a detention hall. Charlie froze. Vaggie went rigid, her spear appearing in her hand, a low growl building in her throat. Alastair's static dropped to a dead whisper, his smile tight and wary. The angel's gaze swept the room, dismissing Charlie, flicking over Vaggie with a hint of distaste, lingering on Alastair with cold recognition, before finally landing on Naruto. She didn't look at the pink lines on his hands. She looked into his eyes. "Uzumaki Naruto," she said. Her voice was crisp, devoid of emotion, yet it carried perfectly. "I am Lute, Lieutenant of the Exorcist Corps. You are an unregistered anomalous entity, creating unauthorized dimensional fluctuations and destabilizing a designated penitence zone. You will come with me." It wasn't a request. It was a citation. "Where?" Naruto asked, his voice steady. He stepped away from the window, putting himself between Lute and the others. "To a holding facility for assessment," Lute replied. "Your energy signature is a contaminant. It must be analyzed, catalogued, and its point of origin determined so the breach can be permanently sealed." Permanently sealed. The words were a death sentence for his hope of return. "You can't just take him." Charlie burst out, finding her voice. "He's a guest. He's seeking redemption." Lute's icy eyes shifted to Charlie. "Princess Morningstar. Your project is noted. It is also irrelevant. This is not a soul. This is an invasive particle. It falls under our jurisdiction." "And if I refuse?" Naruto said. For the first time, a flicker of something, not emotion, but a kind of operational assessment, crossed Lute's face. "Then we will be forced to conduct the analysis in situ. The procedures are intensive. Collateral damage to non-anomalous entities," her gaze swept meaningfully over Charlie, Vaggie, Angel, "is statistically likely. And will not be considered a mitigating factor." The obstacle was no longer a hidden agenda, it was a stark, bureaucratic ultimatum from a higher power. Fight, and he'd get everyone around him killed or worse by heaven's cold, clean wrath. Go with her, and he'd be dissected in some sterile cell. But the threat to the hotel was immediate and explicit. Alastair cleared his throat, the static returning as a polite buzz. "Lieutenant. A proposal. Surely there is a, less disruptive protocol? An agreement that serves both your need for order and our desire for continued, unmolested existence?" Lute's eyes narrowed at Alastair. "The radio demon. Your existence is a tolerated irregularity. Do not make suggestions." She looked back at Naruto. "This is not a negotiation. It is a compliance directive." Naruto's mind raced. A direct fight was out. He couldn't outrun heaven. But he could bargain. He could use their cold logic against them. The risky decision formed, born of desperation and a Hokage's calculus of sacrifice. "You want me contained for analysis," Naruto said, taking a step forward. "Fine. I'll come willingly. For a temporary assessment. On 2 conditions." Lute's eyebrow lifted a millimeter. "You are in no position to set conditions." "First," Naruto continued, ignoring her, his voice ringing with authority. "You guarantee the safety and sovereignty of this hotel and everyone in it. No reprisals from heaven, and you use your authority to forbid any retaliation from other hellborn entities, specifically the Overlord Valentino, for the duration of my assessment. A truce. A 1-year guarantee of safety for this place." Charlie gasped. "Naruto, no." "Second," he pressed, locking eyes with Lute. "The assessment is temporary. I am not a specimen. I am a person, from a sovereign world. You get your data, and then I am released. Back here. No, permanent ceiling. He was bluffing on a cosmic scale. He had nothing to trade but his cooperation. Lute studied him, her frozen lake eyes calculating. The silence stretched. Naruto could feel Charlie's anguish, Vaggi's tense readiness, Alastor's rapt attention. He could feel the phantom pink lines on his hand's pulse, as if Valentino was listening. Your second condition is immaterial, Lute said finally. Your disposition will be determined by the assessment. However, a 1-year guarantee of non-interference for this establishment, and a binding order against Valentino's direct retaliation, can be arranged. In exchange for your immediate, unresisting compliance. A thin, cold smile touched her lips. It is a statistically efficient way to avoid a messy cleanup. She was agreeing. Not to his release, but to the hotel's safety. It was all he could get. It was everything, and it was nothing. Do we have a deal? Naruto asked, the words ash in his mouth. We have a compliance agreement, Lute corrected. She extended a hand, palm up. A complex, glowing sigil of interlocking rings and sharp angles, a heavenly seal, materialized above it. Swear upon it. Your will to your word. This was it. A contract with heaven. The ultimate irony. Naruto looked back at Charlie. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she gave a tiny, helpless nod. She saw the math too. He looked at Angel, who had finally looked up, his expression one of dawning, horrified understanding. You did this for me. The consequence of his choice was a different kind of damnation. Not fire and brimstone, but a sterile white room and a dissection table. He reached out and placed his hand over the sigil. It was cold, like touching the heart of a glacier. The pink lines on his palm flared in protest against the holy symbol, sending a spike of agonizing dissonance through him. He didn't flinch. I swear, he said. The sigil flashed, imprinting itself on the air, then vanished. A binding agreement. Hell's chains were pink and possessive. Heavens were cold and absolute. Lute lowered her hand. Come. The white doorway of light brightened. Naruto took a step towards it. Wait! Charlie cried, rushing forward. She stopped a few feet away, her hands clasped. Tell them you're good. That you want to be better. Maybe they'll. Lute's expression didn't change. Redemption is for souls, princess. Not for errors. Naruto gave Charlie one last look, a look of apology, of gratitude for her impossible hope, and then walked into the light. The transition was nothing like Hell's violent wrenching. It was smooth, silent, and utterly disorienting. The world faded into a blinding, uniform white. Then, the white resolved into substance. He was in a room. It was perfectly cubical, every surface a seamless, matte white that emitted its own sourceless, shadowless light. There was no door. No window. No seam. The air was still, cool, and odorless. The constant hum of Hell was gone, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like pressure on his eardrums. It was the silence of the void he'd glimpsed, but sanitized, institutionalized. The pink lines on his hands dimmed, as if suppressed by the overwhelming sterility. His chakra felt muted, thick, like trying to swim in glycerin. A section of the wall shimmered, and Lute stepped through as if it were water. She was holding a tablet that glowed with the same severe light. Remove your outer garments and stand in the center of the room, she instructed, her tone that of a lab technician. Naruto didn't move. You guaranteed the hotel's safety. The order is filed. It is binding on all signatory powers of the heavenly host and their subordinate infernal contractors. Valentino is bound. For 1 year. She looked up from her tablet. Now. Compliance. Feeling a profound violation that had nothing to do with modesty, Naruto shed his borrowed black shirt, standing bare-chested in the cold light. He moved to the center. Lines of golden light traced across the floor, walls, and ceiling, forming a complex, three-dimensional array around him. It was nothing like Fuinjutsu. It was brutally efficient, geometric, and utterly devoid of artistry. It hummed with a power that felt final. Analysis of anomalous energy signature, designated chakra type A, begins now, Lute said, tapping her tablet. Attempt to manifest the energy. Trapped, bound by his word, Naruto had no choice. He formed the ram seal. A faint wisp of blue energy, streaked with faint yellow, flickered around his hands. It immediately sparked and crackled where it met the golden light of the containment array, like grease on a hot griddle. Lute watched her tablet, nodding slightly. Confirmed. A hybrid life force energy with a parasitic corruption layer. The corruption appears reactive to ambient sin density. The core energy bears markers of structured defiance. An ordered will imposed upon chaos. She looked at him. Fascinating. It is not stolen light. It is forged light. A scar on reality, as we suspected, but a self-inflicted one. You hammered your soul into a weapon. She made another note. Now, manifest the reactive component. The cleansing effect. I can't control it on command, Naruto said through gritted teeth. It reacts to corruption. Lute considered this. Then, she reached to her belt and removed a small, crystalline vial. Inside, a wisp of black smoke twisted and coiled, beating against the walls. It radiated a pure, concentrated malice, a distilled fragment of a sinner's essence. She uncorked it and tossed it at Naruto's feet. The black smoke hit the floor and billowed up, forming a shrieking, tiny face that lunged for him. Instinctively, Naruto's chakra flared in defense. The yellow surged forward, overwhelming the blue. His hand, moving on its own, slapped down on the smoky entity. There was no sound. The smoke simply unraveled. It didn't vanish into nothing, it reversed, untwisting from a complex, knotted pattern of sin into a brief, shimmering puff of neutral soul stuff, before dissipating entirely. The golden array where it had happened glowed slightly brighter, as if energized. Lute's data tablet chirped rapidly. Reaction confirmed. A localized entropic reversal applied to sin matrices. Not destruction. Simplification. A reversion to a prior state. Her frozen eyes held a spark of something akin to scientific triumph. You are not a cleanser. You are a restorer. Or at least, your parasitic component attempts to be. It seeks to remove later additions, to return things to a blank slate. How unexpectedly tedious. The clinical dissection of his very soul was more violating than any torture. They were defining him, boxing him in with their cold terms. Why am I here? Naruto demanded again, the sterile silence pressing in on him. The truth. Lute lowered her tablet. The seal that captured you was a prototype. A defiant snare. Meant to capture and quarantine rogue angelic energies, those who questioned, who rebelled. Who changed. It was deemed too indiscriminate and decommissioned. It seems a latent copy activated, drawn to the most potent source of defiant will in your dimensional locality. You. She tilted her head. You are not a sinner. You are hazardous waste. A living, breathing containment breach for a concept heaven decided was too dangerous to leave lying around. Your home dimension's stubborn belief in willpower created you. Our snare collected you. Now, you are here. An error in the filing system. Hazardous waste. An error. The final, crushing confirmation. And the assessment? Naruto asked, his voice hollow in the white room. Will determine if the chakra type anomaly can be safely neutralized, or if the source, you, must be incinerated to cauterize the breach. She said it as one might discuss sanitizing a surgical instrument. Erasure is painless, I am told. She turned to leave through the liquid wall. Wait, Naruto said. He had one card left. A feeling, a resonance he'd felt when his chakra had screamed through hell. You called it forged light. You called me a scar. What if I'm not the only one? Lute paused, half-turned. You're looking for a way to seal the breach, Naruto pressed, the Hokage's negotiator instinct clawing through the despair. To make sure nothing like me gets through again. But what if the breach isn't just a hole? What if it's a compatibility? My world and yours, they touched. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe you shouldn't just erase me. Maybe you should understand what the defiance you're so scared of actually built. He was talking to save his life, spinning hope from the thin air of this sterile prison. But he saw it, a flicker of consideration in Lute's eyes. Not mercy. Curiosity. The scientist versus the janitor. A compelling theory, she said neutrally. It will be included in the final report. Then she was gone, the wall sealing behind her into seamless white. Naruto was alone. In the perfect silence. In the perfect light. The pink lines of Valentino's debt were the only color, the only imperfection in the void. He had saved the hotel. He had traded himself for a year of their safety. And he was now in a place where hope wasn't just fragile, it was a contaminant to be wiped clean. Micro cliffhanger, hours, or maybe minutes, time had no meaning, passed. Then, the wall shimmered again. But it wasn't Lute. It was a different angel, younger, with an expression of frantic, suppressed urgency. He held a simple white card. He didn't speak. He just slid it through the shimmering wall. It fluttered to the floor at Naruto's feet. On it, in stark, printed letters, was a single line. They are not performing an assessment. They are building a coffin. Project, final scroll. The angel vanished. Naruto stared at the card. The sterile white room no longer felt like a lab. It felt like a tomb. And the burial had already been ordered. Next. Chapter 7, The Broadcast Rebellion. The white card lay on the floor, a shard of truth in a room of lies. Final scroll. The words weren't just ominous, they were final. They weren't studying him. They were designing his unmaking. The sterile silence became the hum of a mortuary fridge. The sourceless light was the glare of an autopsy lamp. Naruto's emotional desire, which had been a complex knot of duty, protection, and hope, burned down to a single, white-hot coal, rebellion. Not the loud, orange-clad defiance of his youth, but the cold, absolute refusal of a Hokage to be erased. They wanted to delete him, to pretend the breach never happened. He would make sure they could not forget. He would make such a noise that all of heaven and hell would have to hear his name, and in hearing it, acknowledge he existed. But he was in a cage designed by gods. No chakra. No tools. No allies. The geometric seal around him wasn't just a barrier, it felt like a spiritual chokehold, pressing down on his very sense of self. The pink lines of Valentino's debt were inert, suppressed by the overwhelming holiness of the space. He was nullified. Think, Naruto. Kakashi's phantom voice, calm in his ear. In a total lockdown, the only weapon left is the enemy's assumption. What was Heaven's assumption? That he was a contained anomaly. That his power was a simple energy signature to be analyzed and silenced. That his will was just data. They were wrong. His will wasn't in his chakra. His chakra was a product of his will. It was born from it, shaped by it. In this place that muted energy, maybe the raw, unformed source could still scream. He closed his eyes, shutting out the blinding white. He retreated inward, past the muted well of chakra, past the swirling yellow corruption, past even the core of his identity as a shinobi, as Hokage. He went deeper, to the place that had faced down pain's despair, that had stared into the infinite Tsukuyomi and said no. He found the little boy in the rain, hated and alone, who still dreamed of being seen. He found the teenager who believed in a friend lost to darkness. He found the man who carried the hopes of a village on his shoulders. It wasn't power. It was memory. It was feeling. A tangled, messy, brilliant, painful knot of connections. The seal around him was designed to contain energy. Could it contain a story? The risky decision was an act of pure, suicidal vulnerability. Instead of fighting the suppression, he would embrace it. He would stop trying to be a shinobi, a Hokage, a warrior. He would just be Naruto. And he would let everything he was, everything he felt, flood out. Not as an attack. As a broadcast. A signal of pure, unvarnished self. He didn't form a seal. He didn't channel chakra. He took a deep breath of the odorless air, and he remembered. He remembered the taste of Ichiraku ramen, the rich broth, the springy noodles. He remembered the weight of the Hokage's hat, not as a burden, but as a promise kept. He remembered Sakura's fist connecting with his head, the familiar, exasperated affection behind it. He remembered Sasuke's rare, grudging smirk. He remembered Irika's tears. He remembered Jiraiya's stupid laugh. He remembered holding his son for the first time, a feeling so vast it terrified him. And with the memories came the emotions. The loneliness of empty apartment rooms. The burning determination on the training ground. The soul-deep grief for his parents, for Jiraiya. The unwavering, illogical love for a village that once shunned him. The furious, protective joy for his friends. The bone-deep faith that people could change, that bonds could heal anything. He didn't push it out. He simply stopped holding it in. He opened the floodgates of his soul and let the entirety of Uzumaki Naruto pour forth. There was no blue light. No yellow corruption. No sound at all in the white room. But the golden geometric seal around him shimmered. The perfect, sharp lines wavered, like a reflection in a disturbed pond. They weren't designed to filter this. This wasn't an energy frequency, it was a psychic tsunami of human experience, contradictory, irrational, profound. In the observation room beyond the seamless wall, alarms began to chirp, not the shrill blare of a containment breach, but a confused, rhythmic pinging Lute had never heard before. Her data tablet screens flickered, scrolling with nonsense poetry, sudden bursts of color imagery, and cascading emotional valence readings that went off the scale. "What is he doing?" a junior technician asked, voice tight. He's emoting, Lute said, her frozen eyes wide with a kind of clinical horror. At an unprecedented amplitude. He's bypassing the energy dampeners entirely. He's using his life narrative as a carrier wave. Back in the cell, Naruto wasn't finished. The memories turned to convictions, to the core tenets of his will. I will never go back on my word. That is my ninja way. I believe in the Sasuke I know. I will save my friend. I will bear the hatred of the world and die as myself. Each belief, each unbreakable vow, was a hammer blow against the sterile, logical, sinless architecture of heaven. The golden seal began to crack. Not physically. Metaphysically. Hairline fractures of pure, defiant color, orange, blue, a splash of Konoha leaf green, spidered across its perfect lines. Naruto opened his eyes. They were not the eyes of a prisoner. They were the eyes of a force of nature. He took the culmination of his life, the sum of all his love and loss and stubborn hope, and he gave it a single, focused purpose. He screamed. Not with his lungs. With his soul. It was a silent scream in the white room. But outside, in the metaphysical layers of reality, it was a supernova. In the happy hotel, Charlie was sobbing quietly in Vaggy's arms. Angel was staring blankly at a wall, the ghost of his chains still haunting his movements. Alastair was by the radio, his hand on the console, dial eyes spinning as he monitored, nothing. The heavenly jamming was complete. Then, the radio console exploded with light and sound. Not Alastair's static. A raw, blinding, psychic blast of pure emotion. It wasn't a voice, but it was Naruto. They felt him. They knew him. Charlie jerked upright, tears forgotten. She felt the loneliness of a boy in the rain, so profound it stole her breath. Then, the fierce, protective warmth of ramen and a teacher's hand. The crushing weight of responsibility, shouldered without complaint. The blazing, unkillable faith in other people. The love, so vast and complicated it felt like a physical force. He's shouting, Vaggy whispered, her spear clattering to the floor, her hand over her heart. Angel Dust let out a choked sound. He wasn't feeling Naruto's memories, he was feeling the echo of his own, the human Anthony buried under a mountain of sin and performance. He felt seen, not as a demon, but as someone who had once known love, however briefly. He crumpled to his knees, silent tears cutting through his makeup. Alastair's smile vanished. His static screeched and warped, trying to process the signal. It wasn't a frequency he could control or manipulate. It was an experience. For the first time, the radio demon was not broadcasting. He was receiving, and it was overwhelming his circuitry. He clutched the console, his form flickering, shadows writhing in agitation. All across Pentagram City, every radio, every television, every crystal ball and scrying pool crackled to life with the same impossible broadcast. Demons clutching their heads in the street heard not words, but the concept of a promise kept. Overlords in their towers felt a spike of defiant will that had nothing to do with hellish power. Sinners in their misery felt a pang of something they'd forgotten, the memory of a mother's touch, a friend's loyalty, a personal dream not yet extinguished. It was a signal of pure, uncorrupted humanity, blasting through the infernal frequencies like a cleansing fire. For 3 seconds, the constant background noise of suffering and malice in hell was drowned out by a single, brilliant, messy soul. In the white room, the consequence was catastrophic. The golden seal shattered not with a bang, but with a sound like 1,000 panes of glass turning to sand. The geometric lines dissolved into motes of light that winked out. The sterile field was gone. Naruto fell to his knees, gasping, utterly drained. He had no chakra left. He had barely any self left. He had poured everything out. But the room was no longer white. The walls were spiderwebbed with hairline cracks of vibrant, living color. And they were no longer seamless. He could see the faint outline of a door. More importantly, the psychic scream had been a beacon. And beacons draw responses. The wall where Lute had exited shimmered violently. Not with her calm passage, but as if struck from the other side. A fist of shadow and antlers, wreathed in frantic, distorted static, punched through the liquid barrier, tearing it like rotten fabric. Alastair stood in the jagged hole, his form unstable, smoking at the edges. His suit was torn. One of his antlers was cracked. His dial eyes were spinning wildly, filled with a chaotic mix of fury, pain, and a terrifying, exhilarating awe. He'd just torn a hole through heaven's holding dimension, following the only signal strong enough to burn a path through the holy static, Naruto's soul scream. You, Alastair rasped, his voice a symphony of broken records. You impossible, deafening, glorious fool. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Naruto looked up, barely able to focus. got their attention. Alastair let out a shriek of static that might have been laughter. You've announced a rebellion on every frequency from the pit to the pearly gates. You've painted a target on reality itself. He staggered forward, grabbing Naruto's arm. His touch was cold and buzzing, full of frayed wires and panic. They will scorch this dimension to find you now. We have to move. The contract is broken. All bets are off. He yanked Naruto towards the torn hole in the wall. Behind them, the White Room's alarms finally escalated to a deafening, holy siren. Golden light began to coalesce into punitive forms at the other end of the room. They fell through the tear, not into the hotel, but into a screaming, chaotic corridor of non-space, the gap between dimensions Alastair had violently carved. Naruto felt reality shredding around them. He saw glimpses of other cells, other White Rooms, and for a fleeting, horrifying second, he saw a vast, silent chamber where a massive, glowing scroll was being inscribed with golden letters of law. On it, he saw his own name, followed by symbols of erasure. Project, Final Scroll. Then they were tumbling, crashing back into familiar, disgusting, beautiful reality. They landed in a heap in the middle of the happy hotel lobby. The furniture was overturned. The chandelier swung crazily. Charlie, Vaggie, and Angel stared, shell-shocked. Alastair immediately scrambled to his feet, his form solidifying, but he looked damaged. His static had a permanent crackle in it. He was panting. We have perhaps minutes, he snarled, his grin a manic rictus. They will come. Not just observers. An army. Naruto pushed himself up. He was empty. Hollowed out. But he was free. And the hotel was still standing. For now. He looked at Charlie. Her hope was gone, burned away by the raw truth of his broadcast, replaced by a steely, desperate resolve. She had felt him. She understood now, not as an idea, but as a feeling. What do we do? Vaggie asked, her voice hard. She was a soldier again, assessing the threat. Before anyone could answer, the air in the center of the lobby warped again, the same pinch in reality that had taken Naruto to Lucifer. But this was slower, more strained. A single, elegant black and red card didn't flutter down. The King of Hell himself stepped through. Lucifer looked different. The melancholic artist was gone. His white suit was pristine, but his eyes blazed with a cold, ancient fire. He held his apple-tipped cane like a scepter. He took in the scene, the damaged radio demon, the hollowed-out Naruto, his daughter's fierce new expression. He didn't look at the window at the exorcists, who were now stirring from their posts, weapons lighting up. He looked at Naruto. Oh, Lucifer said, his voice a low, resonant hum that vibrated in the floorboards. It held no pity, no boredom. Only a stark, terrifying clarity. It's that kind of will. He took a step forward, his gaze piercing. You didn't just break a contract, boy. You screamed your "I am" into the face of the machine that runs on "thou shalt not." He shook his head, a flicker of that old weariness returning, but underneath was something else, a reluctant, grim respect. Father above and below, he murmured, almost to himself. We're in trouble. Micro cliffhanger, outside, the three exorcists were joined by a dozen more, then 100. A glowing, golden portal tore open in the sky above the hotel, and figures in white armor began to pour through in a silent, orderly cascade. The invasion wasn't coming. It was here. And Lucifer Morningstar, King of Hell, turned from Naruto to face his own windows, his knuckles white on his cane. He had to make a choice, hand over the anomaly and pray for mercy, or defend his domain against heaven's wrath, for the first time since the fall. Next. Chapter 8, The King's Gambit. The silence in the lobby was a thin pane of glass, and the gathering storm outside was the hammer. Through the grand windows, the bruised sky was now tessellated with slices of brilliant, painful white as more and more exorcists streamed from the widening portal. They didn't roar. They didn't jeer. They simply arranged themselves into perfect, hovering ranks, their golden spears a field of lethal wheat awaiting the scythe's command. The hum of hell was gone, replaced by a low, celestial thrum that vibrated in the fillings of teeth. All eyes were on Lucifer. He stood with his back to them, a small, immaculate figure silhouetted against the geometric horror of heaven's muster. His shoulders were slumped, not in defeat, but in the posture of a man carrying a weight he thought he'd put down millennia ago. Dad? Charlie's voice was small, a child's plea in the face of an avalanche. Lucifer didn't turn. He tapped his cane once on the floor. A soft, resonant thud echoed through the silent hotel. A king's duty, he said, his voice no longer melodic, but flat, like a honed blade, is to his domain. To its aesthetic integrity. Its rules. It's order. He finally turned. His face was a mask of weary, reluctant calculation. His eyes, ancient and tired, swept over Naruto. You are disorder incarnate. A beautiful, tragic, catastrophic disorder. You break every rule simply by existing here. Naruto met his gaze. He had nothing left, no chakra, no grand speech, only the hollowed-out core of his will. I never asked to be here. Irrelevant. Lucifer snapped, a flicker of his old, creative frustration surfacing. A fire doesn't ask to burn down a forest. It just does. And I am the forester. He gestured violently towards the window. And now the fire brigade from the capital city is here, with holy water and eviction notices for the whole damn woodland. Alastair's cracked static fizzed. A compelling analogy, Your Majesty. Might I suggest negotiation? A strategic surrender of the spark to save the trees? His smile was back, but it was strained, his eyes darting between Lucifer and the heavenly host. He'd overextended himself tearing Naruto out, and now the bill was due. Shut up, Alastair, Vaggie spat, her spear now pointed not at Naruto, but at the windows. She'd been an exorcist. She knew what that silent formation meant. It meant purge protocols. Charlie, we need to get everyone to the lower levels. Now. Charlie wasn't listening. She was staring at her father, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The hope was gone, burned away by Naruto's psychic scream and the cold reality of the spears outside. What was left was something harder, a daughter's understanding. You're going to give him to them, she said, not a question. Lucifer's jaw tightened. He looked at his daughter, and for a second, the mask of the king slipped, revealing the heartbroken father beneath. It's the logical choice, Charlie. One soul, an uninvited, dimensionally anomalous soul, for the continued existence of your dream. For the safety of every soul in this ring. A king's calculus. Naruto's emotional desire was a simple, desperate throb, to not be a bargaining chip again. He'd been a weapon for the village, a vessel for the Kyuubi, a project for Charlie, an experiment for Alastair, a specimen for heaven. He would not be a sacrificial pawn for Hell's king. If he was going to burn, he'd do it on his feet, facing the fire. He took a shaky step forward. Then let's make it easy for you. His voice was sandpaper on stone. Open the door. I'll walk out. No fight. No more damage to your forest. It was the ultimate risky decision. A surrender to annihilation. But it was a choice he would make. It would protect the hotel. It would, maybe, spare Charlie more pain. It was the Hokage's final duty. No. The word tore from angel dust. He was standing now, his makeup streaked, but his four fists were clenched. He looked at Naruto, not with dependency, but with a ferocious, protective loyalty that mirrored Naruto's own. You don't get to do that. You don't get to be the noble fucking sacrifice after you, he couldn't finish. The memory of severed chains was too fresh. He's right, Charlie said, her voice trembling but clear. She stepped between her father and Naruto. This hotel exists because I believe no one is beyond redemption. That no one deserves to be just, thrown away for convenience. She looked at Lucifer, tears in her eyes but her chin held high. If you hand him over, Dad, you're not saving my dream. You're proving it's a lie. You're proving that down here, in the end, we're all just, logical, disposable things. Lucifer flinched as if struck. Charlie's words, her raw, illogical faith, were a weapon he had no defense against. He looked from her face to the cold, orderly ranks of heaven outside, then to Naruto, a soul who defied every category, who had just screamed his humanity into the cosmic void. The consequence of Naruto's offer, of Charlie's defiance, was not a decision, but a catalyst. It forced the king of hell to look beyond his calculus, to the principle of his domain. What was hell, if not the refuge for the illogical, the sinful, the defiant, the unwanted? To give in to heaven's sterile logic now would be the ultimate betrayal of his own creation. A slow, strange smile touched Lucifer's lips. It wasn't joyful. It was grim, ironic, and terrifyingly resolute. Well, he sighed, the sound carrying the weight of eons. I did always hate their homeowners association. He turned fully to face the window, his back now to his daughter and her guests. He straightened his coat, adjusted his cuffs. The melancholic artist was gone. In his place stood the Morningstar, the first rebel, the Prince of Darkness. The power that radiated from him wasn't the chaotic malevolence of hell, it was a deep, resonant, creative authority, the power to shape a universe of sin because he'd once known the architecture of perfection. He raised his cane, not as a weapon, but as a conductor's baton. He tapped it twice against the window. Tap. Tap. The sound was impossibly loud, echoing across the silent city. Every demon in Pentagram City heard it in their soul. Every exorcist in the sky visibly stiffened. The glass of the hotel's grand window didn't shatter. It melted, reforming into a massive, intricate, stained-glass depiction of a snarling, beautiful serpent coiled around a gleaming apple. Lucifer stepped through the image as if it were a doorway, onto thin air. He stood suspended before his hotel, a tiny white figure against the legion of white. "All right, you uptight, pearl-clutching choir." Lucifer's voice boomed, magnified by raw power, shedding all pretense of weariness. It was vibrant, mocking, and laced with a dangerous glee. "This is a registered rehabilitation zone. You're violating about 17 different infernal sovereignty accords, not to mention completely ruining the ambience. Kindly, fuck off." From the center of the heavenly host, Lut descended. Her expression was one of icy contempt. "Lucifer Morningstar. You are harboring a cosmic anomaly slated for erasure. Stand aside. This is heaven's jurisdiction." "My house," Lucifer singsonged, twirling his cane. "My rules. And my rule today is, no smiting the guests. Bad for business. Terrible Yelp reviews." "Then you will be considered complicit," Lut stated, raising her hand. Behind her, 1,000 golden spears angled downwards, targeting the hotel, and him. And removed accordingly. Lucifer's smile turned sharp enough to cut diamond. "Removed? From my own living room? Oh, honey. You can try." He snapped his fingers. The ground beneath the hotel rippled. Not an earthquake. It was as if the foundation of hell itself, in this one spot, became liquid. The buildings across the street groaned and leaned away. From the cracks in the pavement, not lava, but rivers of pure, liquid color erupted, impossible hues of passionate red, jealous green, slothful blue, avaricious yellow. They swirled around the hotel's perimeter, forming a moat of manifested sin. The first rank of exorcists, following some silent command, dove. Their spears gleamed, aimed to pierce the barrier. The spears hit the swirling colors and stalled. The holy light dimmed. The pure white armor began to tarnish at the edges, blooming with rust-like patches of iridescent corruption. The exorcists didn't scream, they made short, choked gasps of confusion as feelings they were not designed to process, doubt, desire, envy, a flicker of enjoyment of the fall, washed over them. They pulled back, their formation breaking for the first time. Lut's eyes narrowed. "You dare corrupt the divine?" "I'm not corrupting anything." Lucifer laughed, spinning his cane. "I'm just reminding them what they're missing. A little taste of the vintage. Now, are we going to have a proper metaphysical tiff, or are you going to go back to your cloud and file a complaint?" He was playing with them. But Naruto, watching from the shattered stained-glass window, could see the strain on Lucifer's face. This wasn't effortless. This was the king drawing on the deepest, most foundational power of his realm, and it was costing him. Lut raised both hands. The golden portal above pulsed, and a new shape emerged. Not a soldier. It was a smooth, featureless white obelisk, hovering horizontally. Runes of binding and negation glowed along its length. The final scroll's enforcement mechanism. "Then you are complicit," Lut declared. "And will be contained for judgment alongside the anomaly. Host, advance. Purge the location." The entire army began its descent, a glacier of holy light. Inside, Alastor grabbed Naruto's arm. "This is our cue to make a strategic exit to a different plane of existence. Now." But Naruto shook him off. He was watching Lucifer, who stood alone against the tide. He saw the king glance back, just for a millisecond, at the hotel, at Charlie's face in the window. Not with regret, but with a painter's fierce pride in his most flawed, most beloved work. Naruto understood then. This wasn't just about him. This was Lucifer choosing Charlie's messy, hopeful, defiant hell over heaven's sterile order. He was finally fighting for something, instead of just presiding over it. And Naruto could not let him fight alone. He had no chakra. But he had something else. The pink lines on his hands, Valentino's debt, suddenly flared to life, burning with a vicious, possessive pain. They were a connection. A tether to the power of hell itself, to its rules of ownership and obligation. A new, desperate gamble formed. If his own will could scream through dimensions, maybe he could use this infernal tether not as a chain, but as a wire. To send a different kind of signal. Not a broadcast of self, but a focused, amplified echo of what Lucifer was doing, a reinforcement of hell's own defiant nature. He ran to the melted window, ignoring Vagi's shout. He placed his hands, palm out, against the rippling, colored energy of Lucifer's sin mote. The pink lines shrieked in protest, touching raw creation. "What are you doing?" Alastor yelled. "Helping." Naruto gritted his teeth. He didn't push chakra. He pushed intent. He focused on the feeling of Lucifer's defiance, on the chaotic, vibrant, living wrongness of hell that was so much more honest than heaven's dead rightness. He thought of every time he'd fought against fate, against hatred, against a proper order that sought to crush the individual. He funneled that feeling down the pink lines, into the moat, into the very ground of hell. For a second, nothing. Then, the rivers of color deepened. The impossible hues became blindingly vivid. The tarnishing effect on the exorcists accelerated. One let out a short, sharp cry as a crack-like desire appeared across its golden visor. The moat didn't just defend, it expanded, lashing out with tendrils of envious green and wrathful red that wrapped around the descending obelisk. The holy runes on its surface sizzled, fighting the corrupting touch. Lucifer, feeling the surge, glanced back. He saw Naruto at the window, hands glowing with hellish pink and human determination. The king's eyes widened in shock, then a wild, approving grin split his face. "Ha! Attaboy. Throw a little anarchy in the paint mix." The combined effect, Lucifer's deep creative power and Naruto's amplified, defiant resonance, was like throwing a symphony into a grand cathedral. The heavenly advance wavered, the perfect formation finally, truly breaking as individual exorcists struggled against the sudden, personalized onslaught of sinful essence. But Lute was unmoved. She pointed at the obelisk. It glowed brighter, burning away the sinful tendrils. It began to rotate, aiming a blunt, nullifying end directly at the hotel's heart. "Enough," Lute said. "Obliviate." A beam of pure, silent whiteness lanced from the obelisk. It didn't burn or blast. It unmade. The air it passed through ceased to be. It was coming for the hotel, for all of them. Lucifer's smile vanished. He raised both hands, summoning a swirling vortex of every sin, a rainbow shield of damnation. The white beam struck the rainbow. And stopped. For a moment, they were locked, the power of erasure against the power of creation through rebellion. The silent beam pressed. The rainbow shield buckled, colors starting to bleach and fray at the edges. Lucifer grunted, a sound of immense strain. He was holding, but barely. Naruto pushed harder through the pink lines, feeling his own soul strain. He was a battery for hell's defiance, and he was running on empty. From the street below, a new sound cut through the silent struggle. A wet, ragged, hacking cough. Then a voice, dripping with venomous, smoke-tinged amusement. Well. What a party. And I didn't even get an invite." Standing at the edge of the morass of colors, having just stepped through a shadowy portal of his own, was Valentino. He was in his full, monstrous form, moth wings spread, for eyes glowing with malicious delight. He wasn't looking at the heavenly host. He was looking directly at Naruto in the window. He held up a hand, and in it glowed a duplicate of the pink lines etched on Naruto's soul, a creditor holding the note. "My wayward debtor is causing such a fuss," Valentino purred, his voice carrying over the battlefield. "Making deals with kings, fighting angels, TSK. Bad for my investment." He smiled, a horrifying sight. "I believe it's time for a repossession." Micro cliffhanger, Valentino raised his other hand. The pink lines on Naruto's skin yanked, not physically, but spiritually. A scream was torn from Naruto's throat as he felt his connection to Lucifer's power violently severed, and his own will hijacked, turned inward. He collapsed to his knees, his vision swimming. Through the haze, he saw Lute's obelisk beam, freed from the rainbow shield's full resistance, punch forward. He saw Lucifer shout, a raw, unfiltered curse of fury and fear. And he saw the beam, cold and silent and final, spear directly towards the hotel, and towards Charlie, who stood frozen, staring not at the beam, but at her father's desperate face. The king had gambled. And the overlord had just tipped the scales. Next. Chapter 9, Symphony of Sin and Will. The white beam was the universe's eraser. It didn't roar, it consumed sound, light, and possibility in its path. It was inches from the stained glass serpent, from the hotel's facade, from Charlie's wide, terrified eyes. Time didn't slow. It fractured. Naruto was on his knees, Valentino's psychic hook buried in his soul, pulling him into a void of pink, possessive static. His own will was a trapped bird beating against a gilded cage of debt. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. He could only watch the end approach. He saw Vaggie throw herself in front of Charlie, a spear of mothwing and righteous fury raised in a hopeless block. He saw angel dust, not fleeing, but stepping forward, all four arms spread as if to catch the uncatchable. He saw Alastor, his form a blur of frantic static, calculating escape vectors and finding none. And he saw Lucifer. The king of hell wasn't trying to rebuild his shield. The beam was too close. Instead, he did something smaller, faster, and infinitely more desperate. He flicked his wrist. The stained glass serpent in the window winked. Its emerald eye, a shard of bottle green glass, flashed. A pinpoint of power, not aimed at the beam, but at the space inside the hotel, right at Charlie's feet. The floor beneath Charlie, Vaggie, and Angel dropped away. Not into a pit, but into a swirling, pastel-colored vortex that smelled of acrylic paint and childhood safety. A panic room, crafted in a nanosecond by a father's love. They vanished just as the beam struck. The world dissolved into silent, blinding white. Naruto braced for annihilation. It didn't come. The white beam hit the hotel, and splintered. It wasn't Lucifer's power. It was the hotel itself. Or rather, what the hotel had become. Weeks of Naruto's presence, his leaking chakra, his emotional broadcasts, his desperate fight against corruption, had seeped into the very plaster and wood. The Happy Hotel was no longer just a building in hell. It was a monument to a specific, stubborn idea, that change was possible. The beam of erasure met a structure saturated with the psychic residue of defiance. The two absolutes, finality and potential, collided. The result wasn't an explosion. It was a cacophony. The white light fractured into a prismatic blast of conflicting realities. One patch of wall aged 1,000 years into dust, then rewound to brand new lumber. A chandelier turned to solid light, then to weeping crystal, then to writhing snakes. The air in the lobby became syrup, then vacuum, then filled with the echoing laughter of ghosts that hadn't died yet. The very laws of physics, in that localized space, had a nervous breakdown. Naruto was thrown across the lobby, slamming into the grand piano, which emitted a chord of profound sorrow before crumbling into rose petals and sawdust. The pink psychic hook in his soul snapped from the shockwave, the feedback drawing a howl of rage from Valentino outside. The white beam sputtered and died. The obelisk in the sky flickered, its pure purpose fouled by the chaotic backwash. Silence returned, thick and stunned. The hotel still stood. But it was wounded. It bled chronology and spat out bits of paradoxical matter. A grandfather clock in the corner was now a sapling. A portrait of an unknown demon was crying real, black tears that sizzled on the shifting floor. Outside, Lucifer hovered, panting, his white suit smudged with unreality. He stared at his creation, his daughter's sanctuary, now a localized scar on existence. His expression was one of profound, personal violation. Lute surveyed the chaotic scene, her icy composure finally cracked by a flicker of frustration. Her clean solution had been contaminated. The anomaly has metastasized, she declared, her voice cutting through the weird silence. Containment radius must be expanded. Purge the entire block. The heavenly host regrouped, their spears aiming wider. Naruto's emotional desire was no longer for himself, or even for escape. It was for an end to the bleeding. He had caused this. His presence was a toxin that turned everything it touched into a battlefield. He pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest. The pink lines on his hands were dull, throbbing. His chakra well was dust. He had nothing left to fight with. But he had to stop it. He had to end the wave. He stumbled towards the gaping, reality-warping hole that had been the window. He had no plan. Only a final, desperate instinct, to stand between the warring powers and demand they look at what they were doing. Stop. The word wasn't loud. It was raw, torn from a shredded throat. But it landed in a moment of held breaths. All eyes turned to him, Lucifer's furious grief, Lute's cold assessment, Valentino's greedy anticipation, the blank visors of 100 exorcists. Just, stop, Naruto repeated, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. He looked at Lute. You erase me, this keeps happening. Another me. Somewhere. Because the idea you're trying to kill doesn't die. It just finds another face. He turned to Lucifer. And you can't protect something by letting it become a war zone. You protect it by making it strong enough to stand on its own. He looked at the bleeding, paradoxical hotel. At the pastel vortex where Charlie was safe. This place, it's not about redemption anymore. It's a testament. To trying. To caring in a world built not to. That's the defiance you're all so scared of. Not power. Not chaos. Compassion. And you can't kill that with a spear or a contract. He was spent. He had nothing else. He stood there, a broken figure in a broken doorway, offering only words as the armies of heaven and hell poised to strike. The risky decision was ultimate vulnerability. It was laying down every weapon, even the weapon of his own will, and asking for a ceasefire. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then, Valentino laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. Beautiful speech, sweet cheeks. Real tear-jerker. Now, if you're quite done, he raised his hand again, the pink lines on his palm glowing. My property is coming home. But before the psychic hook could re-engage, a new sound cut through the air. Scree. It was Alastair's static, but amplified 100-fold, distorted into a wall of deafening, chaotic noise. It wasn't aimed at anyone. It was aimed at everything. The radio demon stood on the balcony above the lobby, his form flickering like a damaged film reel. His microphone was pressed to his lips, his free hand conducting the screaming feedback. His dial eyes were wide, manic, fixed not on the armies, but on the fabric of reality around the hotel. Enough. Alastair's voice boomed through the static, a rare show of raw, unfiltered anger. This is MY Broadcast. My stage. And you are all monopolizing the bandwidth. He wasn't protecting anyone. He was throwing a tantrum because the cosmic drama had overshadowed his show. But his tantrum had power. The screeching static wave hit the unstable, paradoxical field around the hotel. And it did something unexpected. It didn't calm it. It didn't erase it. It orchestrated it. The weeping portrait's tears flew upward. The sapling clock grew into a tree made of ticking wood. The rose petal sawdust swirled into the shape of a dancing couple. The chaos wasn't eliminated, it was forced into a bizarre, syncopated order. A jazz number played on instruments of broken reality. The sudden, shocking imposition of Alastair's will upon the chaos created a momentary buffer, a dome of screaming, organized weirdness that pushed back against both the heavenly hosts forming purge and Valentino's reaching power. Lucifer stared, gobsmacked. You're conducting the scar tissue. Alastair grinned, blood trickling from his ear. Call it, remixing. It was a stalemate. A terrible, ear-splitting, reality-bending stalemate. And into this stalemate stepped a small, determined figure. The pastel vortex at the center of the lobby shimmered. Charlie climbed out, followed by Vaggie and Angel. She wasn't crying. She wasn't pleading. Her face was set in lines of grim, royal authority Naruto had never seen. She looked at her father's strained face, at Alastair's bleeding ear, at the armies outside, and at Naruto, standing broken in the doorway. She walked to Naruto's side. She didn't touch him. She just stood there, shoulder to shoulder with the anomaly. Then, she did something no one expected. She began to sing. Not a hopeful, Broadway-style number. A low, steady, resonant hum. It was the first note of her redemption song, but stripped of all flourish, reduced to its core, a sound of pure, unwavering belief. It was a sound that asked for nothing, that promised nothing, but simply was. Vaggie, after a second's hesitation, joined her. A harmony of protective fury. Then Angel, his voice rough and unused to anything but cynicism, added a third, shaky note, a thread of hard-won, fragile gratitude. 3 voices. A tiny chord against the symphony of static and the silent march of angels. But it was a chord that resonated in the chaos Alastair was conducting. The dancing rose-petal couple slowed, turning to listen. The ticking tree stilled. The weeping portrait's tears hung in the air, catching the non-light. It was a sound that didn't fight. It affirmed. It affirmed the hotel's purpose. It affirmed the trying. It was a pinprick of coherent identity in the madness. Lute, watching from the sky, her finger raised to order the purge, paused. The 3 sinners' song did nothing to her. But the way the chaotic field calmed around it, organizing not into Alastair's frantic jazz but into something quieter, more stable, it was data. An unexpected variable. The corruption stabilizes around localized belief matrices, she muttered, her soldier's mind analyzing. The anomaly acts as a catalyst, but the substrate is infernal faith. Lucifer heard her. His eyes snapped from his daughter to Lute. A king's calculus, faster than light. He saw it, not a solution, but a precedent. A loophole. The consequence of Naruto's vulnerability, Alastair's tantrum, and Charlie's song was not victory, but a seismic shift in the board. Enough. Lucifer's voice rang out, royal decree cutting through all noise. He pointed his cane not at heaven, but at the space between them. You want the anomaly contained, Lute? Fine. But your method is inefficient and damaging to my real estate. Lute lowered her hand slightly. Propose an alternative. Lucifer's smile was all sharp edges. He stays. Here. In my custody. In this, stabilized anomaly zone. He gestured to the hotel, now a bubble of semi-organized weirdness. Consider it a permanent, self-monitoring containment field. The very nature of the place, its purpose, amplified by his presence, keeps the infection localized. He becomes part of the quarantine. You get your contained breach. I get to avoid having a chunk of my city turned into a divine parking lot. And my daughter, he glanced at Charlie, his voice softening a micron, gets to keep her proof of concept. It was a devil's bargain in the truest sense. Naruto would not be erased. He would be institutionalized. Made a permanent fixture of the very place he was trying to leave. A living, breathing part of the Happy Hotel's foundation. Lute was silent, processing. The obelisk behind her hummed, its erasure protocol on standby. The risk of further dimensional leakage is mitigated by the stabilizing effect of the localized belief system, as you so astutely observed, Lucifer interrupted smoothly. We turn his destructive resonance into a structural one. He becomes a load-bearing wall in the asylum. All eyes turned to Naruto. The pawn on whom the deal hinged. He felt the weight of it. Eternal captivity. A life as a component of Charlie's dream, a curiosity in Alastor's menagerie, a prisoner in a cage of his own making. No going home. No son. No Konoha. But Charlie was looking at him, her song faded, her eyes holding not hope, but a terrible, respectful sorrow. She knew the cost. Outside, the spears were still leveled. Valentino was smirking, already calculating how to exploit a stationary asset. Naruto looked at his hands. The pink lines, Valentino's claim, still pulsed. He was already bound. What was one more chain, if it stopped the bleeding? If it saved the hotel, saved Charlie's dream, saved these broken souls who had, against all odds, stood with him? He was the Hokage. His duty was to the village. This was his village now. A village of outcasts, built on a fault line in reality. He met Lucifer's gaze, then Lute's. He gave a single, slow nod. I accept, he said, the words final as a tombstone. Lute stared for a long moment. Then, she gave a curt nod. A probationary containment accord. Heaven will monitor. Any sign of metastasizing influence beyond these designated parameters, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. She raised a hand. The obelisk retracted its beam, the golden portal in the sky began to close. The exorcist host, as one, turned and ascended, vanishing into the shrinking light. The immediate threat was gone. Valentino's smirk didn't fade. Ah, the fun's over? Don't worry, debtor. He blew a kiss at Naruto. I'll be seeing you. Rent's due, every day, forever. He melted back into his shadow portal and was gone. The silent pressure lifted. The bizarre, Alastor-conducted reality around the hotel settled into a permanent, low-grade weirdness. The ticking tree remained, the portrait kept one eternally suspended tear. Lucifer landed softly inside, his power retreating. He looked exhausted, aged. He looked at Charlie, then at Naruto. Welcome to the family, he said, his voice hollow. You're a permanent fixture now. Don't touch the ducks. He turned and walked towards the shadows, vanishing without a sound. Alastor's static died with a final pop. He slumped against his microphone stand, panting, but his grin was back, triumphant and crazed. A permanent broadcast. Co-hosted by Chaos and Compassion. Ratings will be phenomenal. Charlie walked to Naruto. She didn't hug him. She just looked at him, her eyes full of an understanding that hurt more than any accusation. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Naruto said nothing. He looked out at the Hell's Cape, now with 100 glowing, heavenly sensor lights hovering at a polite distance around his new, eternal home. He was saved. He was condemned. He was part of the furniture. Micro cliffhanger, as the adrenaline faded, a new sensation crept in. A faint, familiar, golden warmth, kindling deep in his hollowed-out core. Not his chakra. Something else. Something that felt like sunshine. He looked down at his palm. The pink lines of Valentino's debt were still there. But weaving between them, almost invisible, was a single, thin, glowing thread of pure, radiant gold. It pulsed once, softly, in time with Charlie's humming as she turned to survey her forever-changed hotel. The thread felt like a promise. And like the sharp edge of a knife yet to fall. Next.